Forbidden angel mysteries and concealed Vatican truths remain unspoken to this day. For generations they've rested beneath stone foundations and behind steel barriers within the world's most influential religious institution. Throughout the hushed hallways of supreme ecclesiastical power, ancient texts and lost celestial beings continue to whisper from secured chambers guarded by terror, not devotion. These revelations aren't folklore. They represent deliberately obscured fragments of the past that Vatican officials have silently shielded from public view. For those drawn to such mysteries, remember to follow for additional content. Now make yourself comfortable, shut your eyes, and allow this tale to begin. Within Vatican City's tranquil centre, where ancient stone appears to vibrate with history and footfalls dissolve into quietude, one name resonates through nearly every sanctuary, every sculpted surface, every murmured invocation. Michael, the archangel, the celestial warrior, heaven's guardian. His identity is voiced with authority, commonly accompanied by Gabriel and Raphael. These three divine messengers are familiar to much of humanity. Scripture contains them, stained glass depicts them, ancient volumes house them on monastery shelves. Yet for everything that's revealed, vastly more remains concealed. Centuries ago, the Church acknowledged solely these three by title. Eventually, they proclaimed these the exclusive angels deserving recognition. However, earlier times differed greatly. Forgotten manuscripts, abandoned or stored away, reference additional angels. 7, according to some sources. Others describe 72 magnificent, mysterious, mighty identities. Uriel, Raguel, Sariel. Titles that formerly filled prayers appeared in ancient scrolls and featured in early religious customs. By Rome's council during the 8th century, most such identities vanished. Not merely abandoned, but purposefully eliminated. Anxiety surrounded naming what remained incomprehensible. Church authorities worried that acknowledging numerous angels might encourage worship or summoning inappropriate entities. Thus barriers began forming, texts became restricted, identities fell silent. Only Michael, Gabriel and Raphael survived. Michael the Defender. His title translates to "who resembles God," always depicted bearing weapons. Revelation shows him confronting darkness. Gabriel the herald announced to Mary her divine pregnancy. Raphael the physician led young Tobias through peril and illness in an obscure narrative from Tobit's book. What became of the others? What of those celestial beings whose identities once filled pages now absent from sacred scripture? Several appear within Enoch's book, an ancient manuscript rejected by Catholic authority. Once extensively studied, Enoch describes angelic groups who descended earthward, taught prohibited knowledge, and suffered severe consequences. These are the observers. Their story isn't one the Church prefers retelling. Deep within Vatican archives, those identities' records still exist. They aren't forgotten, merely secured away. Perhaps for protection, perhaps for authority, perhaps because certain mysteries shouldn't be voiced openly. Yet the identities remain present, waiting silently, preserved in ancient writing behind restricted collections where only authorized individuals may examine them. During Christianity's earliest period, long before mass-produced Bibles and contemporary regulations, faithful believers acknowledged not merely 3 angels, but 7. These 7 received collective recognition, believed to stand before God's throne, each serving distinct purposes, each possessing unique voices. Their identities passed through spoken tradition, recorded in aging ink on parchment, and carved into forgotten chapel corners. Some titles survive in whispers today. Uriel, Wisdom's Angel; Remiel, Mercy's Bearer; Serachiel, Spirit's Guardian. Yet gradually, these identities started vanishing. The Church experienced transformation. When the 8th century emerged, leaders feared what they termed improper devotion. Excessive numbers of people directed prayers toward angels they barely comprehended, following identities absent from authorized scriptures. Roman Council bishops assembled in 745 and reached a decision. Henceforth, only 3 angels would receive official recognition. All others, they determined, should remain nameless entirely. Why did the Church make this choice? Some claim it protected believers from confusion. Others suspect different motivations, that the identities themselves possessed power, that speaking them opened doors the Church preferred sealed. One identity centered this quiet removal: Uriel. Early Christian writings once honored him, sometimes depicting him with weapons or scrolls. Eastern churches still remembered and portrayed Uriel in gold. But westward, particularly in Rome, he gradually disappeared. His identity left the liturgy, his imagery hidden, his presence diminished until vanishing. Still, not every record vanished from Vatican's deepest archives. Beyond chambers familiar to most researchers, texts still listing all 7 archangels by identity remain. Some exist in manually copied books from 4th and 5th centuries, preserved behind iron barriers. They aren't fantasy. They represent history, maintained in silence. Prayer records also exist, brief, cautious lines written by monks who apparently knew these angels intimately. Phrases like, "Shield me, O Uriel, from unseen flames," or "Grant your compassion, O Remiel, during sorrow's hour." Simple words once spoken by candlelight in frigid stone chapels. Currently, most Catholics never hear these identities during Mass. They don't appear in official prayer collections or Sunday school lessons. But they once did, and they still rest, quiet and patient in Vatican's hidden locations. Some suggest the Church chose forgetting them. Others claim the angels chose withdrawal. Whatever the cause, their presence lingers just below what we're permitted to know. There existed a time when angel identities were spoken freely in early Christian gatherings. Believers would assemble by torchlight and discuss divine messengers, not only as heavenly beings, but as guardians and guides, with identities known and treasured. Yet something shifted deep within church walls, and it wasn't accidental. It was a carefully considered decision by those who feared the unknown's power. In 745, during Rome's council, the Church issued an official declaration. They decided only 3 angels would be recognized by identity: Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. All others, regardless of tradition's age or beloved nature, were to be removed from prayers, liturgy, and memory. It was a silent erasure, accomplished not through fire, but through quietude. The stated reason was straightforward. Superficially, church leaders feared that naming angels beyond the sacred 3 might create confusion or worse, lead people to worship beings not approved by Scripture. But beneath that surface, many believe something deeper existed. Some claim the other angel identities originated from older sources, from books the Church excluded from its canon. Like Enoch's book, these texts spoke of angels who defied their position, who came to earth, who taught humanity secrets not meant for sharing. And the Church, perhaps wisely, closed that door. This choice wasn't made lightly. Period records describe intense debates, monks and bishops arguing by candlelight, scrolls spread across worn wooden tables. Some believed removing the identities would safeguard faith. Others warned that forgetting angel identities might also mean losing their protection. Notes from this era even mention visions, dreams of winged figures standing at firelit hall edges, their identities fading from memory while they attempted to speak. The council's ruling stood. From then forward, Western churches followed the new regulation. Statues were removed. Writings were recopied, this time omitting certain identities. And slowly, across generations, the angels who once stood beside Michael faded into silence. Yet the Vatican didn't destroy everything in the archives. Buried among older texts are letters and scrolls mentioning these band identities. Some were written in pre-council centuries. Others were copied by those who remembered and couldn't forget. These documents weren't shared, but they weren't burned. They were kept locked away in case the world might someday need to remember them. And so the identities remain, even now, waiting in darkness. Not lost, only hidden, their wings no longer carved in stone. But their presence still lingers in quiet places where light and shadow meet. Long before the Bible was sealed and printed in familiar form, angel stories were scattered across many writings. Some were included in what we now call scripture, others were set aside, labelled apocryphal or quietly hidden away. Among those lost writings were books that told stories the Church would later find too strange, too dangerous, or too difficult to control. And in those forgotten pages, angels were not just messengers or protectors. They were watchers, warriors, and sometimes rebels. In the accepted biblical books, angels appear briefly and purposefully. Gabriel delivers messages. Michael leads battles. Raphael offers healing. Their presence is clear but limited. There's no deep explanation of who they are, where they originated, or how their world functions. But in books left outside the canon, like Jubilees and Enoch, angels are everywhere. They have ranks, identities, and missions. Some walk the earth. Some fall in love. Some disobey. Enoch's book is among the most striking examples. This ancient text, once treasured by many early Christians, tells of an angel group known as the Watchers. These beings, assigned to observe humanity, instead chose to descend to Earth. They taught forbidden knowledge, like weapon making and herb usage for magic. They took human wives. Their children became giants. The world grew wild and dark. The Church couldn't ignore such stories. As time passed, it moved to remove them from common use. Enoch's book was declared non-canonical. Its teachings were said to confuse or mislead, yet it never fully disappeared. It continued being copied in monasteries, held in Eastern libraries, and passed quietly from hand to hand. Some scholars believe the Vatican still holds several of the oldest known copies locked deep in its archives. They are not displayed, they are protected. Even though these texts were rejected, they left a mark. Paintings, carvings, and poems across Christian history contain traces of these older angelic tales. A figure with too many wings, a sword shaped like fire, a child too large for any cradle. These details may seem small, but they point to stories that were never truly erased. The line between accepted scripture and hidden texts is thin and sometimes drawn not by truth, but by fear. Fear of questions of power beyond understanding, of stories that open doors better left closed. But the angels in these stories remain, their identities half-remembered, their wings folded in silence. And in the stillness of Vatican libraries, beneath layers of dust and time, their stories wait. Not lost, but kept. Not spoken aloud, but never truly forgotten. Hidden within ancient beliefs' shadows lies a book that the Church has never fully embraced, yet has never entirely abandoned either. It is called Enoch's Book, and within its pages are some of the most haunting angelic stories ever written. Though not part of the official Catholic Bible, this book was once read by early Christians, and even quoted in other scriptures. Today, it is rarely spoken of from the pulpit, but deep within the Vatican, copies of this text are said to be kept under careful watch. Enoch's book tells a story the Church has long struggled with. It begins with light, with heavenly visions and divine order. But quickly, the tale takes a darker turn. An angel group called the Watchers are sent to observe the world. They look down upon humanity and begin to feel curiosity. And then something stronger. Against their orders, they descend to Earth. Once there, they begin teaching not holy lessons, but forbidden ones. The Watchers teach humans how to craft weapons. They show them how to mix potions and draw charms. They reveal secrets about stars and heavens turning. These teachings, though full of knowledge, are said to bring great harm. The world becomes violent, twisted by power it was never meant to hold. And then comes the most troubling part of all. The angels take human women as wives. Their children grow into giants, creatures too large and wild to be contained. This story, strange and powerful, does not appear in the Bible most people know, yet it was once widely accepted. For a time, it shaped the way many saw angels not only as holy servants, but also as beings with free will, capable of falling. By the 4th century, church leaders began distancing themselves from this tale. Enoch's book was excluded from the canon. Some said it was too strange, too dangerous. Others believed it revealed things best left unsaid. Even so, the Vatican never fully destroyed it. Copies were stored away, studied by a few trusted scholars, hidden in the archive shadows. The story remained. In the depths of those rooms, behind thick doors and heavy walls, there are scrolls with angelic identities that don't appear anywhere else. Identities tied to fire, wind, judgment, and loss. Identities of angels who stepped away from heaven and left their mark on earth. The Vatican has never confirmed how many versions of Enoch's book it holds, or how old they are. But there are whispers among researchers, quiet rumours of a version older than any known, bound in leather and sealed in glass. Why keep a book they once rejected? Perhaps because, despite its danger, it may contain a truth too old to erase. A truth the Church cannot teach, but dares not forget. Among the many legends hidden inside Vatican walls, there is one that speaks not of 3 angels or 7, but of 72. These are not the bright winged messengers from paintings and prayers, but something far older, spoken of in hushed voices by mystics and forgotten scholars. Known as the 72 Names of Power, these angelic beings were said to hold the secret to guiding creation itself. Each one, it was believed, governed a part of the universe, a fragment of divine energy too vast to understand, yet too important to ignore. The idea comes from a strange blend of early Christian thought and Jewish mysticism and ancient numerology. 72 was seen as a perfect number, connected to God's divine name and heaven's mysteries. Each identity was said to carry its own vibration, a key to unlocking the spiritual world. Some monks believed these identities could protect, heal, or even call down unseen forces, but others feared them. The Church, over time, began viewing such practices with caution. Prayer, they said, should be simple, direct, not drawn from secret identities written in forgotten tongues. Still, the identities were never fully erased. In the 15th century, a quiet group of scribes in Rome copied a manuscript now believed to contain a full list of the 72 angels of the Shem Hamaforash, an ancient Hebrew phrase meaning the explicit name. This manuscript, handwritten in gold and bound in lambskin, is rumoured to be stored in a sealed drawer within the Apostolic Library. Only a handful of people have ever claimed to see it, and none have been allowed to speak of it freely. Why would the Vatican keep such a list? Perhaps as a curiosity, or perhaps because these identities were once feared, not for their superstition, but for their power. Some records suggest that during times of crisis, popes have ordered readings from the manuscript, using the identities in prayers meant never to leave ordinary men's lips. One faded letter, unsigned but marked with a bishop's seal, speaks of a midnight ritual performed under candlelight, using the identities one by one as a plea for divine mercy during a great sickness. Today, the Church says little about this subject. It teaches of angels known and accepted, encourages prayer through simple faith. But still, somewhere beneath St. Peter's stones, that ancient book may rest covered in dust, sealed with care, waiting not for the curious, but for a moment of true need. To name an angel, the old texts warn, is to call it forth. And there are some identities the Vatican would rather the world never speak aloud again. There is a corridor deep within the Vatican that few have walked. Its air is cold even in summer, and the scent of old parchment lingers like incense. The shelves here are heavy with manuscripts bound in leather, some with no titles, others written in languages no longer spoken. Among these shelves, hidden behind unmarked drawers and beneath layers of sealed documents, lie writings that speak of something strange and quietly powerful. An alphabet not of men, but of angels. The idea of an angelic language is not new. It appears in mystical writings from Christianity's early centuries and even before, in the secret teachings of Jewish and early Christian scholars. This language, they believed, was not just a communication method. It was something more sacred, more pure. It was said to be heaven's original language, a perfect tongue spoken by angels before the world was made. And some believed that those who could read it might come to understand creation itself. One identity often appears in connection with this mystery: Enoch. In the same ancient book once cast aside by the Church, Enoch is said to have been taught heaven's language by the angels themselves. He recorded symbols, sounds, and meanings that no human had ever heard before. The book tells us that Enoch did not die, but was taken by the angels, carried into God's presence. He left behind writings, many of which vanished over time. But some may have found their way into the archives beneath the Vatican. There are quiet claims from researchers who once had limited access to the apostolic library. They describe a manuscript written in a script unlike any known alphabet. The symbols are curved and delicate, some drawn in gold ink, others in faded black, as if the hand that wrote them trembled with awe. The pages are thin and fragrant with age, and no one has been able to fully translate them. One legend tells of a Jesuit scholar in the 17th century who tried. He studied the symbols for over 10 years, convinced they were part of the angelic alphabet. When asked what he had learned, he said only this: that every letter sang, and that to read a single word aloud brought silence to the room. A few months later, the scholar fell ill and died, without finishing his work. His notes were taken by the Vatican and never seen again. What remains of this alphabet, and whether it truly belonged to angels, is a question the Church has never answered. But the idea continues to live on in art, in whispers, and in secret rooms where symbols glow under candlelight. Perhaps it is not meant to be read. Perhaps it is only meant to remind us that not all messages are written for human eyes, and some truths are spoken in silence. In the quiet rooms of the Vatican, where candlelight bends across the spines of books centuries old, the voice of one man still lingers. St. Thomas Aquinas, the 13th century scholar, wrote with a mind as sharp as a blade and a heart devoted to faith. His great work, the Summa Theologica, is known across the world. But within its many pages there lies a subject he treated with careful precision: the celestial beings. Thomas Aquinas didn't merely portray them as divine messengers. He attempted to understand their hierarchies, their functions, and their structure, as though charting a realm of brilliance that extended beyond mortal vision. He organized the celestial hosts into 9 orders within 3 tiers. At the summit were the seraphim, cherubim, and thrones, dwelling in God's immediate presence. The central tier consisted of dominions, virtues, and powers who directed celestial movements and preserved creation's harmony. The final tier included principalities, archangels, and angels, those who interact with humanity. This wasn't merely theoretical speculation. Aquinas wrote with such precision and certainty that he appeared to be documenting reality rather than conjecture. The Church embraced much of his doctrine, and today his works remain essential reading in theological institutions worldwide. However, certain aspects of his scholarship are seldom discussed. In subtle passages, Aquinas proposed that angels travelled at incomprehensible speeds, possessed knowledge beyond human understanding, and could communicate directly with souls without language. He also suggested that some celestial beings might serve purposes still concealed from humanity, roles hidden even from holy men and prophets. These words, though preserved, often remain unspoken as they generate more mysteries than solutions. Within the Vatican's archives lie copies of Aquinas' writings in his original handwriting. Researchers note that these early manuscripts contain marginal annotations, brief Latin phrases that never appeared in published editions. One passage describes an encounter during prayer, when Aquinas sensed what he called a soundless voice, a flameless light. He provided no further explanation. He simply noted it as a blessing, one he felt could not be revealed to the broader world. The Vatican has safeguarded these documents meticulously, permitting only select scholars to examine them, perhaps because they unveil something that transcends theology into pure mystery. If Aquinas, the Church's greatest intellectual, suggested experiences beyond written knowledge, what additional secrets did he possess? What else lies hidden in those marginal silences? His influence, though centuries distant, continues speaking through those pages. He provided humanity with a framework for understanding celestial beings, yet he also created spaces where certainty couldn't penetrate. Within those spaces, the Vatican maintains its most guarded mysteries, the ones concerning angels that even Aquinas couldn't fully comprehend. Far within the Vatican, beyond secured entrances and beneath centuries of accumulated wisdom, shelves contain not only saints' writings but also humanity's quiet efforts to grasp heaven's organization. Among these collections rests a subject that has perpetually hovered at faith's periphery, the teaching of the 9 celestial orders. It's transmitted through whispers, developed by theologians, and illustrated in manuscript margins, yet never completely clarified. From church pulpits, these orders represent a luminous ladder, 9 ranks of beings moving between the divine and earthly realm, each holding specific positions and purposes. The highest orders reportedly dwell nearest to God's throne. These are the seraphim, cherubim, and thrones, immersed in eternal radiance, burning with love and wisdom beyond comprehension. Beneath them, dominions, virtues, and powers execute creation's design. They serve as cosmic guardians, directing stars, shaping movements, and maintaining equilibrium where human sight fails. Nearest to humanity stand principalities, archangels, and angels themselves. These walk among us, protecting nations and guiding souls, delivering messages through dreams and visions. This structure gained recognition through St. Dionysius's writings and later St. Thomas Aquinas, who refined it with careful scholarship. Yet within the Vatican's collections, manuscripts suggest the 9 orders story represents only part of something greater. Ancient texts hint at concealed orders, unnamed beings whose identities were never permitted in common worship. Scholars who glimpsed these writings reported entire sections left empty, as though names were intentionally removed or written in symbols too sacred to reveal. There are also notes, fragile with age, speaking of dread. One monk recorded that naming the orders too precisely might summon them closer, and that humanity wasn't prepared to witness their true forms. Another account tells of a vision experienced by a cardinal during 15th century night prayers. He described not 9 orders, but 10. He claimed their voices filled the chapel, each carrying both harmony and warning, though he dared not record the name of the order he believed stood above all others. Today, the Church teaches the 9 orders gently as lessons of structure and devotion, but the deeper writings remain concealed, locked in silence. Perhaps this protects the faithful from confusion, or perhaps truly, knowing the orders means seeing too much of the unseen. The Vatican therefore allows only faint outlines of this heavenly hierarchy to be known, while complete truth lies shadowed behind iron gates and forgotten ink. When visitors enter the Sistine Chapel, their attention turns to Michelangelo's vast ceiling. The creation of Adam spans the center, hands reaching toward each other in what has become history's most recognized image. But closer examination reveals mysteries hidden in the paint. Not just the famous hands, but background figures, faces, and wings appearing at the edges. The Sistine Chapel's angels aren't mere decoration. They contain secrets scholars have debated for centuries. Michelangelo wasn't only an artist, he was someone who studied ancient texts, spending countless hours reading scriptures and early church fathers' writings. He understood official angelic doctrine, but he also knew forbidden tales, those kept quietly in books not read publicly. Some believe he painted hints of these lost stories into the chapel walls, where only patient, careful observers could notice. Many angels he painted don't resemble popular imagination's cherubs. They appear strong, human, and almost disturbing. Their faces show intensity, their bodies are muscular, and their presence feels weighty, as though they're guardians rather than gentle messengers. Several even lack wings, making them appear more like the watchers described in Enoch's book than angels typically shown in church art. This detail is subtle, but intentional, leading some to believe Michelangelo revealed more than intended. One ceiling section shows angels clustered around God as he separates light from darkness. Hidden within their forms are shapes some art historians claim resemble letters, as though the angelic language itself had been incorporated into the fresco. These shapes remain unconfirmed, and the Vatican has never commented. Yet speculation continues. Did Michelangelo leave traces of a language not meant for human eyes? Or did his brush simply follow instinct? There's also the Last Judgment, painted years later on the same chapel's altar wall. Here, angels wield swords, trumpets, and chains. They don't only guide souls upward, but also drag others down. It's a vision of angels as warriors and enforcers, embodying a role that echoes ancient writings the Church rarely discusses. The Vatican has permitted millions to view these images, but explains them only through scripture. For those sitting silently beneath the frescoes, the chapel itself seems to whisper. The angels are present, their eyes watchful, their forms containing stories the paint cannot fully express. Perhaps that's the greatest secret of all. The Sistine Chapel isn't just a worship space, it's a repository of hidden truths, written not in books but in colour and stone. Throughout Rome's streets, Gian Lorenzo Bernini's name is spoken with reverence. His art continues filling the city with life and movement, transforming stone into something seemingly alive. Among his most celebrated works are the angels he carved, statues standing on the bridge leading to St. Peter's Basilica. At first glance, they're simply beautiful guardians, wings spread, faces serene. But for those who pause, who examine more closely, Bernini's angels seem to tell stories deeper than their marble forms. Each angel holds a passion instrument, reminders of Christ's suffering. One bears the cross, another the thorn crown, another holds the nails. Their expressions are solemn, eyes cast downward as though carrying weight beyond stone. Scholars have long debated these angels' meaning. Why should light beings carry pain's tools? Why should their faces appear not only holy but almost troubled? Bernini was more than a sculptor. He was deeply connected to the Vatican, commissioned by popes, trusted with projects that defined an era. He knew church teachings but also had access to deeper whispers. Some believe through his angels he left clues about these celestial beings' true role. They aren't only messengers, only guardians. They're witnesses to sacrifice, to suffering, and to mysteries too vast for human comprehension. Rumours suggest Bernini studied ancient texts before beginning his work, texts speaking of angels who stood silently at history's edge. These writings suggested angels not only sang in joy, but also watched in sorrow, carrying knowledge of both divine glory and human frailty. Perhaps this explains why Bernini's angels seem so meaningful. They aren't distant, untouchable beings. They're close, almost human, bearing symbols that connect heaven and earth. Visitors standing on the bridge at twilight sometimes say the angels appear alive. Their wings catch fading light. Their faces, carved centuries ago, seem to shift with shadows. The Vatican calls them art, masterpieces of faith and devotion. Yet one wonders if Bernini gave them more than beauty. Perhaps he gave them secrets he couldn't speak aloud. Within the Vatican, other works of his remain less public, sketches and studies of angels with details never carved. Some show figures without wings, others with eyes seeming to hold fire. These sketches are preserved but rarely displayed. The Church honours Bernini's work but doesn't explain all of it, so the angels remain silent on their stone bridge, watching pilgrims pass. They carry crosses and thorns, but also carry questions. In their carved stillness, they remind us that even in beauty, mystery exists. And in the Vatican's heart, Bernini's angels still whisper stories no one dares speak. Beneath Rome's bustling streets, in a church resting quietly above layers of older ruins, lies a mosaic that has puzzled historians for centuries. The Basilica of San Clemente, with its winding staircases descending into the past, holds treasures few notice initially. Among them is an apse mosaic, shimmering with gold and deep blue where angels hide in plain sight. They don't stand in rows like later art, nor do they appear as gentle-winged children. Instead, they emerge as shapes woven into paradise's vines, guardians seeming both earthly and beyond. The mosaic was completed in the 12th century, yet its design carries echoes of something older. The angels appear bound within creation's patterns themselves. Their faces are calm, but their eyes seem to follow viewers, as if reminding anyone who dares look that heaven's watchers never turn away. In the vine and branch swirls, some believe there are hidden letters marks resembling fragments of the angelic alphabet whispered about in earlier centuries. These shapes are small and nearly invisible, yet once noticed, they cannot be unseen. Scholars studying San Clemente argue the mosaic is more than decoration. They suggest it may carry teachings not meant for public sermons. A few claim the mosaic's angels reflect a secret tradition where angels weren't only messengers, but also knowledge guardians woven into creation's very fabric. If true, the mosaic isn't only art, but also silent testimony of beliefs too mysterious for open discussion. The Vatican has preserved San Clemente carefully, yet doesn't draw attention to these details. Guides speak of church history, the layers of Roman homes and temples beneath, but rarely mention the strange apse figures. Perhaps because the meaning is uncertain, or perhaps because the angels in the vines hold a message, once deliberately kept quiet. There's also an old record from a 15th century visiting monk who described praying in San Clemente at night. He wrote of seeing gold tiles glimmer as if lit from within, the angels glowing faintly in silence. He ended his note with one line: "They are watching from the walls." His words were never explained but remain copied in a Vatican library manuscript. For centuries, worshippers have prayed beneath the mosaic without fully seeing what it contains. Yet for those who pause, who let their eyes trace the vines and light, San Clemente's angels remain there. They're guardians not of one place, but of a secret, a reminder that heaven's presence isn't always above us. Sometimes it's hidden in stone and tile, waiting for us to notice. In the Vatican's heart, among treasures kept from public view, there's said to be a golden angel hidden in the papal treasury. Unlike well-known statues lining bridges and chapels, this figure isn't placed where pilgrims may see it, resting instead in a chamber of guarded objects among saints' relics and kings' gifts. Few have spoken of it openly, and those who have described it with mixed awe and unease. The angel is reportedly no larger than a child, sculpted entirely of gold, wings spread wide, feathered with extraordinary detail. But its face isn't serene like painted angels. Instead, it bears an expression harder to name, something between sorrow and warning. Its eyes are carved so deeply that some who've seen it claim they seem alive, following viewers no matter where they stand. Legends say the statue came to Rome in the early Middle Ages, carried by Eastern pilgrims. Some believe it was once housed in a church, destroyed by fire, rescued and sent to the Vatican for safekeeping. Others claim it wasn't made by human hands at all, but discovered in a sealed tomb, its gold untarnished. Even after centuries, these stories are difficult to prove, but they continue surrounding the golden angel like shadows around flame. In the 15th century, a cardinal wrote to another clergyman describing the angel as guardian of a truth that must not be spoken. He didn't explain further, but added that the angel was kept in darkness most of the time, only brought out during certain papal household prayers. If true, then the golden angel was more than artwork. It may have been seen as a power vessel, a symbol too mysterious for public devotion. There are whispers that the angel has an inscription on its base's underside, written in characters ordinary scholars don't recognise. Some say the letters belong to the angelic alphabet, the same one reportedly taught to Enoch. The Vatican has never confirmed this, and the statue is rarely displayed. When papal collection treasures are shown, the golden angel is always absent, resting instead behind locked doors. To those who believe its secrecy is telling, why guard a statue so closely if it were only another relic among many? Why keep its presence quiet, if not because it points to stories the Church prefers to leave unsaid? The golden angel stands in silence, its face of sorrow and warning carved into gold. Whether it's a simple treasure or silent witness to truths hidden for centuries, only the Vatican knows. And so it waits in the treasury, unseen yet never forgotten by those who whisper its name. In the Vatican's heart, among treasures kept from public view, there's said to be a golden angel hidden in the papal treasury. Unlike well-known statues lining bridges and chapels, this figure isn't placed where pilgrims may see it, resting instead in a chamber of guarded objects among saints' relics and kings' gifts. Few have spoken of it openly, and those who have described it with mixed awe and unease. The angel is reportedly no larger than a child, sculpted entirely of gold, wings spread wide, feathered with extraordinary detail, but its face isn't serene like painted angels. Instead, it bears an expression harder to name, something between sorrow and warning. Its eyes are carved so deeply that some who've seen it claim they seem alive, following viewers no matter where they stand. Legends say the statue came to Rome in the early Middle Ages, carried by Eastern pilgrims. Some believe it was once housed in a church, destroyed by fire, rescued and sent to the Vatican for safekeeping. Others claim it wasn't made by human hands at all, but discovered in a sealed tomb, its gold untarnished. Even after centuries, these stories are difficult to prove, but they continue surrounding the golden angel like shadows around flame. In the 15th century, a cardinal wrote to another clergyman describing the angel as guardian of a truth that must not be spoken. He didn't explain further, but added that the angel was kept in darkness most of the time, only brought out during certain papal household prayers. If true, then the golden angel was more than artwork. It may have been seen as a power vessel, a symbol too mysterious for public devotion. There are whispers that the angel has an inscription on its base's underside, written in characters ordinary scholars don't recognise. Some say the letters belong to the angelic alphabet, the same one reportedly taught to Enoch. The Vatican has never confirmed this, and the statue is rarely displayed. When papal collection treasures are shown, the golden angel is always absent, resting instead behind locked doors. To those who believe its secrecy is telling, why guard a statue so closely if it were only another relic among many? Why keep its presence quiet if not because it points to stories the Church prefers to leave unsaid? The golden angel stands in silence, its face of sorrow and warning carved into gold. Whether it's a simple treasure or silent witness to truths hidden for centuries, only the Vatican knows. And so it waits in the treasury, unseen yet never forgotten by those who whisper its name. There are prayers within the Vatican that have never appeared in prayer books or been spoken aloud at Mass. Among them is one known only to few, a prayer addressed to what's called the Church's guardian angel. This prayer is reportedly older than most liturgies used today, whispered secretly by popes and bishops during moments of great peril. It doesn't appear in official catechisms or missals, and for centuries it has remained hidden, passed quietly from hand to hand in fragile manuscripts. The idea that the Church itself has a guardian angel isn't entirely foreign. Scripture often speaks of angels protecting nations and guiding peoples. But the prayer found in Vatican archives goes further. It speaks of a single angel, vast and powerful, charged with watching over the entire Church through wars, persecutions, and betrayals. The words, written in Latin, call on this angel to defend Christ's bride from shadow and flame, to guard the holy city, and to strike down what the text describes only as the serpent of division. No one outside the Vatican has heard the prayer's full version. Fragments, however, have surfaced through letters of monks who once copied it by hand. A 13th century Benedictine monk once wrote that as he penned certain sacred words, the chamber around him grew silent, as though unseen presences had gathered to watch. In the 17th century, another cleric mentioned in his private journal that this particular prayer surfaced during periods of division within the Church, when its very foundation seemed at risk. He described it as a supplication meant only for the darkest hours, recited by candlelight in the Pope's presence. The Vatican has never acknowledged maintaining such a prayer, yet evidence persists. Some claim it was whispered during Rome's sacking in 1527, when invaders threatened the heart of Christianity itself. Others suggest it was spoken once more during World War II as bombs fell dangerously close to the Holy City. True or false, this prayer remains locked away from the faithful. Why would the Church guard these words so fiercely? Perhaps because they weren't designed for everyday worship. Addressing an angel who watches over the entire Church might imply authority exceeding even that of saints. Such prayers could blur sacred boundaries between worship and reverence, between the divine and his servants. The Church has always feared such dangerous territory. Still, the prayer waits in hidden chambers, preserved for moments of ultimate crisis. Should it ever be spoken completely, it might remind humanity that angels protect not just individuals, but the very soul of faith itself, invisible yet eternally vigilant, standing sentinel over the Vatican through centuries of darkness. Deep within Vatican collections lie volumes that few will ever glimpse, books bearing no titles and transported to private altars only under armed escort. Among these cites a small exorcism manual crafted during medieval times and preserved through generations of use. This isn't the familiar Roman ritual known to priests worldwide, the standard guide for prayers of deliverance. This manual holds something different. Within its pages, supposedly, lies a missing section, a page that was transcribed, erased, and ultimately sealed away. Those aware of its existence whisper that it concerned not demons, but angels. The story of this vanished page first emerges in 16th century records when a Jesuit priest described hearing about a ritual prayer designed to call forth angelic assistance during exorcisms. He claimed it wasn't a plea for divine power, but a direct summoning of Michael Gabriel and a third angel whose name was written but later removed. This prayer, according to his correspondence, proved so powerful that the possessed would either find immediate freedom or collapse as if dead. The priest noted that the Church swiftly prohibited its use, fearing that calling angels so directly might cross into forbidden realms. Centuries afterward, a scholar with archive access observed that the exorcism manual kept in the Vatican contained a textual gap between two prayers. Empty space existed where something had clearly been extracted. The binding stitching was irregular, as if a page had been carefully cut away. No explanation was provided, but faint Latin notes remained in one prayer's margin. One phrase translates as "never to be spoken again." Another simply reads, "The names bring danger." Why would the Vatican remove an angelic prayer from a book meant to combat evil? Perhaps it suggested too much control, too much certainty in mortal hands. To summon angels by their secret names, as certain traditions taught, risked wielding power that belonged to heaven alone. The Church feared such possibilities. Better to erase the page than risk its misuse. Yet the page wasn't destroyed. Some believe it was placed in the archive's deepest sections alongside other forbidden texts. Rumours persist that prayer fragments still exist in handwritten copies kept by certain religious orders, though none have ever admitted this openly. The missing page remains one of the Vatican's quiet enigmas. Was it a prayer too dangerous to exist? A key to commanding powers that should never be controlled? Or was it a secret meant to remind the Church that even in fighting darkness, there are limits? Whatever the truth, that page's absence speaks louder than any remaining words. It represents a silence lasting centuries, protected in shadow. Whispers echo through the Vatican about a prayer once written exclusively for papal lips, a brief invocation addressed to Michael the Archangel. Not the familiar prayer recited in churches after Mass, but something ancient, sealed for centuries and hidden from believers. This incantation, as it's been called in fragments of memory and rumour, supposedly carried power not of comfort, but of command. It wasn't a gentle request for protection, but a charge summoning Michael to act with fire against Shadow's forces. The first reference to this prayer appears in the 15th century, when a bishop wrote to a colleague about a document locked in the papal chancery. He described it as words so potent they couldn't be spoken without terror. He claimed it had been given to the Pope in a vision and had been spoken aloud completely only once, during a night when Rome itself shook under invasion's threat. The city was saved, though history records little about the prayer that was uttered. The bishop concluded his letter with a warning. This must remain sealed, for no man can wield it without trembling. Later Vatican records hint at its existence again. A 17th century scholar cataloguing old manuscripts wrote of finding a prayer where Michael is called not only Prince of the Heavenly Host, but also Keeper of the Hidden Flame. These words don't appear in prayers taught to the faithful. The scholar noted that the parchment showed signs of multiple copying, as though it had been carefully preserved across ages. But after his notes, nothing more was written. The manuscript never appeared again in public inventories. Some say the incantation was more than mere words. It may have contained the angel's true name, one of the secret names erased by church councils long ago. To speak it aloud was to draw Michael closer, not as symbol, but as presence. The Church, wary of such power, kept it locked away, to be spoken only in the gravest times. Stories even exist that during the 20th century's war years, a pope prayed fragments of the incantation in the apostolic palace's stillness, asking Michael to shield the city from destruction. Rome escaped the heavy bombing that devastated other cities, though no evidence links these events. Still, the Vatican's silence on this matter deepens the mystery. The incantation to Michael remains sealed, its words known only to a handful guarding the archives. Whether it's a relic of ancient devotion or a dangerous invocation never meant to be spoken, none outside the Vatican can say. What's certain is that the Church has kept it hidden, as though it contains truth too overwhelming for the world to bear. Beneath Rome's great basilicas, under altars where countless masses have been celebrated, marks are carved into stone that most visitors will never witness. They aren't decorations or ordinary inscriptions. They are names, sometimes written in Latin, sometimes in older languages, sometimes in symbols resembling no human script at all. These names are whispered to belong to angels, inscribed by priests and stonemasons long ago. then concealed beneath marble floors where only clergy could approach them. The practice supposedly began in Christianity's earliest centuries, when believers met in underground chapels and catacombs. To them, angels weren't distant figures painted in gold. They were guardians walking beside them through fear and persecution. Some believed that carving angelic names into their altar's very stones could call down protection and sanctify sacred ground. These names weren't always the familiar ones of Michael, Gabriel, or Raphael. Many belonged to angels whose names were later banned or forgotten. In Vatican archives, documents describe discovering these carvings during older churches' reconstruction. One 15th century account tells of workers repairing a chapel's foundations who found beneath the altar the word Uriel etched in deep strokes. Uriel is a name not recognized in official Catholic teaching, yet it appears often in apocryphal writings as an angel of fire and light. The inscription was carefully covered, left in place, but its record was sealed in archives. Other reports tell of altars where multiple names were carved in circles, as though forming boundaries or seals. Scholars studying drawings of these carvings suggest they may have been intended to repel evil, creating spaces where the sacred couldn't be touched. Some believe the names themselves were considered keys, words of power that called the unseen to stand watch over the holy table. The Church has never confirmed these stories publicly. Instead, it teaches that angels are invoked through prayer and devotion, not through secret inscriptions. Yet records of their existence persist. And some priests who served in ancient churches whispered that they could sense a strange presence near those hidden names, as if the walls themselves remembered. To carve a name into stone is to make it endure long after the voices that spoke it are gone. The names under the altars remain unseen, buried beneath centuries of worship, yet they still lie there, silent guardians in faith's foundation. The Vatican may never reveal the complete list of those hidden inscriptions, for some names it once erased from memory are still carved in stone, waiting in the church's oldest wall's shadows. There are prayers said in churches that have been sung for centuries, words carried in hymns and psalms that every believer knows. Yet there are also liturgies that never reach public ears, prayers written in secret and preserved only in the Vatican's guarded archives. Among these are what some call the Liturgies of Light, mysterious writings describing ceremonies invoking angels not as symbols but as living presences. These texts, kept hidden from ordinary worship, hint at a relationship between heaven and earth far deeper than what the faithful are taught. The Liturgies of Light appear in scattered references across ancient manuscripts. A 12th century note mentions a mass spoken in the company of radiant ones, while a later 16th century text describes a procession where unseen voices joined the monks chanting. The Vatican has never confirmed these ceremonies, yet the hints are too numerous to ignore. It's said that within the Apostolic Library's sealed shelves, books record prayers meant to call angels into the Church's very air, not as visions or symbols, but as true witnesses to the altar. Some scholars who studied these fragments believe they were once used only by the clergy's highest orders, perhaps by popes themselves. The prayers are written in a language blending Latin with strange words no one can fully translate. Some resemble the angelic alphabet spoken of in apocryphal texts. Others appear to be names carefully guarded and forbidden to be spoken outside ritual. The liturgy's structure suggests dialogue, as though the celebrant addressed not only God, but also the angels standing beside him. One 18th century story tells of a pope who ordered a secret service using the Liturgies of Light during a plague. The account claims that in the chapel's stillness, the faint sound of wings was heard above the choir, though no birds were near and no windows were open. The event was never recorded in official history, but a letter describing it survives in the Vatican's private collections. Why would such prayers be hidden? Perhaps because they suggest too direct a calling, too close a bridge between human and angel. To invite angels into worship in such a way might confuse the faithful or, worse, tempt them to call on powers they couldn't control. And so the Church sealed the texts, placing them in archives where only trusted eyes could see. The liturgies of light remain a mystery, half remembered in fragments and whispers. They remind us that in the Church's long history, there may have been moments when angels were not only spoken of, but truly invoked. Whether such ceremonies would still work today is a question left unasked, for the Vatican keeps its silence, guarding the words that once called light into darkness. In the Jesuit order's long history, countless stories exist of study, discipline, and quiet devotion. Yet hidden among their records is a tale that speaks not of books or missions, but of something stranger. It tells of a Jesuit scholar who late one night in the 16th century claimed to have been visited by an angel. His name has been removed from most official accounts, as though the Vatican wished to bury his memory. But fragments of his writings remain in archives, enough to piece together the outlines of what he witnessed. The Jesuit had been studying old texts in a quiet library chamber, surrounded by the smell of wax and parchment. He wrote that the air grew still, so still that even his lamp's flame ceased to flicker. At first he thought he had fallen asleep, but when he lifted his head, he saw a figure standing in the room's corner. The figure was tall, its form glowing faintly, though no light touched it. It had wings, but they didn't move. They seemed carved from light itself, folded behind its back. The Jesuit described the being not as terrifying, but as overwhelming. He felt a weight in his chest, as though his heart couldn't contain the sight. The angel, he wrote, didn't speak with words. Instead, meaning poured into his mind like water, filling an empty cup. The message was, "You are seen." After this, the angel lifted one hand, and the scholar fell to his knees, trembling not from fear, but from deep awe. When he awoke, the figure was gone. The lamp still burned. His books lay open before him. At first he thought it a dream, but then he noticed his candle's wax hadn't melted further, as if time itself had stopped during the encounter. He wrote down what he remembered, sealing his notes in a theological text's margins. When these writings were found years later, they caused unease among church officials. The Jesuit order was known for obedience and discipline, not for visions. To admit that one of their own had claimed such an experience might encourage others to seek similar encounters. The Vatican chose not to spread the story. His notes were gathered and placed in archives, and his name was gradually erased from memory. Still, the account survives in whispers. Some believe the Jesuit was chosen for his devotion, that the angel came to remind him of the unseen guardians who walk beside those who serve. Others fear the story was silenced because it suggested angels could appear unbidden without the Church's sanction. Whatever the truth, the Midnight Visitor remains one of the Vatican's quiet mysteries, a story written in a single night's stillness and hidden away ever since. There is a story, told only in fragments, about a choir that was once heard within the Vatican but never seen. It comes from writings of priests who served in the Great Basilica centuries ago, men who swore they had stood in empty chapels and yet heard voices lifting in song. These weren't ordinary voices, but harmonies so pure and layered that no human choir could have created them. The sound seemed to come from the walls themselves, echoing softly at first, then filling the space with music that moved the heart in ways words couldn't. The earliest mention of this mystery comes from the 14th century, when a monk copied down a note describing voices of light that sang during the midnight office. He wrote that no singers were present, and yet every man in the choir stall turned his head at once. The melody rose and fell with perfect beauty. But when the monks tried to join, their voices faltered, as if the song wasn't meant for human tongues. The sound faded, leaving only silence and the trembling of those who heard. Centuries later, in 1681, another account appears. A Swiss guard assigned to night chapel duty reported hearing a chorus above him. As he walked his rounds, he searched every corner, certain that singers had hidden within the loft. But he found nothing. The guard captain dismissed his report, yet within weeks several others came forward, claiming the same. The Vatican noted the reports quietly, but they were never spoken of beyond closed doors. Some scholars believe these voices were nothing more than echoes or acoustic tricks. Rome's chapels are filled with marble and gold, their domes and arches carrying sound in strange ways. But those who heard the mysterious choir insisted the music was unlike any echo. It carried warmth, clarity, and something deeper, as though each note was woven with meaning beyond language. One priest wrote that when he listened, he felt not only peace, but also sorrow, as if the song carried both comfort and warning. The Vatican never declared these events to be visions or miracles. It let them rest in silence, stored away in handwritten notes and personal diaries. Perhaps it feared that acknowledging them would open the door to speculation the Church couldn't control. Or perhaps the voices were understood as real, but too sacred to share openly. The choir hasn't been heard in recent times, or if it has, no public record has been made. Yet the story remains whispered by those who spend long hours in the Vatican's oldest chapels. They say that when the night is quiet and the air very still, one might catch a trace of it, a harmony too perfect to be earthly, a song belonging to angels who remain unseen. Among the many mysteries whispered about the Vatican, one story is darker than most. It tells of a Swiss guard who, after a night watch within the Apostolic Palace, was never the same again. His name was recorded only briefly in archives, then erased, but fragments of his tale remain in scattered notes and letters. He was a young man, disciplined and faithful, trusted to walk the halls where popes and cardinals slept. Yet after one particular night, he refused to speak of what he had seen, and soon after he was gone, dismissed from service under a silence that has never lifted. The event supposedly took place in the early 18th century. The guard was making his rounds past a chapel closed for the evening when he heard a sound within. Expecting intruders, he opened the heavy doors. What he claimed to see was not thieves or priests, but a figure standing at the altar. The figure shone faintly as though lit from within, its wings arching high, brushing the ceiling's shadows. The guard later told a confessor that the air itself seemed to tremble. And the figure's face was both beautiful and terrible to behold. He dropped his halberd and fell to his knees, but no words were spoken. Instead, a silence filled the chapel, heavy and absolute. The guard remained frozen until the figure faded into nothing, leaving only the sanctuary lamp's dim glow. Shaken, he fled the room and swore never to return. The next day, fellow guards noticed his pale face and trembling hands. He couldn't bring himself to hold his weapon or walk the halls alone. When questioned by his captain, he gave no clear answer. Only later, in confession, did he reveal the vision of the winged presence. His priest recorded the account and quietly passed it into the Vatican's files, where it was sealed. The guard was soon relieved of duty and sent away. After that, no more is known of him. Why would such a story be buried? The Vatican has always been careful with visions, preferring to confirm only those that strengthen faith without stirring fear. An angel appearing to a soldier in silence, without message or mission, would raise questions too difficult to answer. Was it truly an angel or something else? Was it a blessing or a warning? The record of the Swiss guard lingers only as a shadow now, his name forgotten, his fate unknown. Yet among those who study Vatican mysteries, his story remains one of the most unsettling. For if it's true, then angels don't always arrive with words of comfort or joy. Sometimes they appear in silence, leaving behind a presence that changes a life forever, even if no one dares to speak of it again. There is a chamber in the Apostolic Palace known as the Room of Tears, a place where each newly elected pope withdraws after accepting the keys of St. Peter. It's a small and quiet space where the papacy's weight settles upon a man's shoulders in solitude. Most accounts of what takes place there are hidden in secrecy, spoken only in whispers. Among the countless tales preserved in Vatican history lies one that has unsettled historians for centuries, a narrative that some believe describes an encounter not with mortals but with a celestial being. A letter from the 17th century, written by a cardinal within the papal inner circle and kept in the archives, tells of a pope who emerged from the Room of Tears visibly disturbed. His complexion was ashen, his hands shaking, his eyes holding something that seemed to blend amazement with terror. When questioned by his closest advisors, he revealed that during his solitary time in the chamber, he had not been truly alone. A figure had stood before him, wrapped in radiance, its wings spreading in perfect silence. The being, he explained, spoke not a single word. Instead, it pressed its hand against his chest, and in that instant he experienced the overwhelming weight of his new position. He understood it was not a blessing but a warning, a sign that he had been selected under divine surveillance and could never escape the watchful gaze of heavenly beings. The cardinal who documented this encounter never disclosed the Pope's identity. Though the timing indicates it might have occurred in the early 1600s, the Vatican has never acknowledged it. Still, the account has endured in whispered conversations among scholars who research the secret traditions surrounding papal succession. The Room of Tears, with its modest furnishings and ceremonial garments prepared for the new pontiff, serves as a place of transformation. But if this story holds truth, it might also be a space where heaven itself comes close. Other popes have emerged from the chamber showing clear signs of anguish, some crying openly, others too overwhelmed to utter a word. The devout often view this as a natural reaction to the enormous responsibility of guiding the Church, but those familiar with the ancient stories hint at something deeper. Maybe angels have inhabited that room throughout time, observing in silence as each man embraces his destiny, reminding him that his choices will resonate through all eternity. The Vatican maintains the Room of Tears accessible only to a select few witnesses, and its secrets remain locked away. Yet the stories persist, unspoken publicly, but preserved by those who share them in hushed confidence. If an angel truly awaits in that chamber, then every pope starts his papacy not merely under human observation, but beneath heaven's eternal watch, touched by a presence impossible to dismiss. In the 12th century, an Irish bishop known as Saint Malachy journeyed to Rome. His mission was intended to reinforce connections with the Church, but legend suggests he returned carrying more than papal blessing. According to records written in later years, Malachy received a vision during his time in the Holy City, a vision where an angel disclosed to him the destiny of the papacy itself. The angel revealed a lengthy succession of popes extending far into the future, each one identified with a phrase or symbol that suggested his reign. The prophecy, as it became called, contained descriptions for over 100 future successors of St. Peter. Some were straightforward, like From the Lily or The Angelic Shepherd. Others carried darkness, such as the persecuted Pope. Scholars have debated for generations whether these lines represented genuine predictions or skillful fabrications. But the legend maintains the source was an angel who appeared before Malachy in Rome. The angel, wordless yet brilliant, placed the burden of the future upon him and then vanished, leaving Malachy shaken. When the document emerged publicly in the late 1500s, long after Malachy's passing, it sparked intense controversy. Many considered the list too precise to be fabricated. Others argued it was composed after the events occurred, yet through the ages, whenever a new pope was chosen, the world returned to the prophecy, matching the descriptions to the man in white. The Vatican itself has never validated the prophecy's authenticity, but it has also never completely rejected it. Some of the descriptions have indeed appeared to align remarkably well. One pope, labelled "from the midst of the moon," was elected during a lunar eclipse. Another, known as the Glory of the Olive Rule, belonged to an order represented by the olive branch. Whether chance or intention, these connections strengthen the belief that Malachi truly witnessed what an angel once revealed to him. The most disturbing aspect of the prophecy appears at its conclusion. The final entry describes a pope who will lead the church through great tribulation, after which Rome itself will face divine judgment. No name is provided, only the image of a shepherd standing amid destruction. This last passage has created anxiety in every generation, raising questions about whether it points to the papacy's end or even the conclusion of this age. The Vatican discourages discussion of Malachi's vision, yet the document remains within its collections. Some say the secrecy protects believers from fear. Others suspect it's because the prophecy, if genuine, would confirm that an angel once revealed more than the Church was ready to acknowledge. Regardless, the vision of St. Malachi endures as one of the strangest mysteries connected to angels, a silent shadow in Vatican history. Among the most puzzling events linked to the Vatican are the visions of Fatima, where 3 shepherd children in Portugal claimed to encounter a lady dressed in light. The world recalls the secrets of Fatima, but less discussed is a detail found in the writings of one seer. Before the lady appeared to them, an angel is said to have visited them, preparing their souls for the vision that would follow. This angel, often called the Angel of Peace, spoke words of prayer and encouraged them to sacrifice for the world's sake. What is seldom mentioned is that one of the children, Sister Lucia, maintained a diary where she described additional encounters with this angel, accounts that weren't widely distributed. In one entry, she wrote that the angel carried a chalice and host, glowing with light, and that when he knelt before them, his expression seemed filled with grief. He taught them prayers that appear in no standard catechism, words that spoke of the Holy Trinity and of making amends for sins against the sacred. These prayers were so distinctive that even today they sound unlike the language of common devotion. When portions of her diary were delivered to the Vatican, not everything was made public. Some pages, particularly those that detailed the angel's appearances, were separated. Reports indicate they remain in the archives, secured in a file connected to Fatima's secrets. The Church's official stance emphasises the visions of the lady, but the angel's involvement has been quietly minimised, as if it carried significance too profound for general disclosure. A few scholars who have examined the fragments suggest the angel's appearance wasn't simply preparation for the children, but a reminder to the Church of a truth it had long overlooked. The angel seemed to function as a priest, bowing before the chalice and host, demonstrating that heaven itself honours the mystery of the Eucharist. This raises questions that touch the very core of theology, questions that might cause discomfort if explored too openly. There is also mention of the angel's silence, moments when no words were exchanged, yet the children felt understanding flow directly into their minds. They described it as both calming and overwhelming, as if their thoughts belonged to someone else. This silence, Sister Lucia suggested, remained with her throughout her life, though she rarely spoke of it openly. The Vatican's choice to keep portions of the diary concealed has sparked speculation for decades. Were the angel's words too mysterious, too powerful to share with the world? Or did they reveal truths about angels' roles that might have disturbed the faithful? Whatever the reason, the Angel of Fatima remains one of the quiet secrets the Vatican has never fully disclosed. A guardian presence remembered in whispers, partially revealed and partially hidden in history's folds. In the late 20th century, in a small village in Bosnia and Herzegovina, a series of apparitions began that attracted pilgrims from around the globe. The place became known as Medjugorje, and many of the visions described there spoke of a lady clothed in light, similar to the Fatima visions. But buried within these reports is a quieter detail, one that has not received equal attention. Some of the seers spoke not only of the lady, but also of an angel who appeared to them in silence. Unlike the vivid messages delivered by the lady, the angel never spoke. According to the testimonies, the figure appeared radiant and motionless, standing beside them. Like a guardian, it carried no weapon, no scroll, no words of instruction. Instead, its presence alone filled the visionaries with both tranquility and profound reverence. They claimed that the silence of this angel was more meaningful than speech, as though understanding passed directly into their hearts without requiring sound. One described it as a silence so complete that even their thoughts seemed quieted. The Vatican has long approached Medjugorje with reservation. While it has acknowledged the devotion of the pilgrims who journey there, it has refrained from declaring the apparitions completely authentic. Yet the reports of the angel persist in the background, mentioned less frequently, but always remembered in interviews. When questioned about what they witnessed, some of the visionaries described the angel's eyes as unwavering, focused on something beyond human perception. They said it seemed to be observing not them, but the world itself, as though it was protecting against a threat invisible to mortal sight. What concerns researchers is that these details have often been omitted from official summaries. The silence of the angel is rarely noted in Vatican documents, though it appears in the seer's earliest records. Some believe this is deliberate, for the role of such an angel is not easily understood. Why would heaven send a messenger who offers no words? Why reveal only presence without command or prophecy? One interpretation is that the angel's silence was itself the message. In a world filled with noise, conflict, and anxiety, the stillness of heaven may have been intended as a reminder that God's presence doesn't always come in thunder or declaration. Sometimes it arrives in quiet, watching as a silent guardian whose very existence is sufficient. Yet the Vatican has never clarified its position, choosing instead to maintain the reports in careful balance. For the faithful who journey to Medjugorje, the silence of the angel remains one of the most haunting aspects of the apparitions. It suggests that heaven may not always explain itself, and that angels may sometimes appear before us in ways beyond words, their secrets preserved not in speech, but in the unbroken stillness of their gaze. In the extensive history of the Vatican, there are stories that remain concealed in plain sight, whispered only among those nearest to the papacy. One such story tells of a pope in the early 1900s who claimed to hear voices singing within the walls of the apostolic palace itself. It was not the music of choirs practicing nor the sound of priests in prayer. He insisted that the voices were not human at all, but angelic, rising and falling in harmonies too perfect for earthly voices. The Pope never discussed this publicly, yet private letters preserved in the archives reveal his distress. In one letter to a trusted cardinal, he described awakening at night to a soft, distant chant that seemed to echo through the stone of his chambers. Initially, he thought it was his imagination or the wind, but as the nights continued, the sound became clearer. He wrote of voices layered upon one another, creating melodies that no written music could capture. He sensed the presence of something immense and unseen, and though the sound carried beauty, it also brought a deep sadness. The cardinal who received the letter responded carefully, warning the Pope not to dwell on the matter. He reminded him that the Church must differentiate between divine comfort and delusion. Yet the Pope continued to report the singing. At times, he said, the voices seemed to carry words, though never in a language he recognized. On one occasion, he thought he heard his own name within the song, and it brought him to his knees in prayer. The Vatican has kept these letters sealed, though copies are rumoured to exist in private collections. Those who have read them believe the Pope truly felt he was hearing angels, not as visions in dreams, but as audible presences in the walls of his residence. Some speculate that the voices were a form of comfort during a time of great responsibility. Others fear they were a warning, a reminder that heaven observes closely when the burden of decisions rests on one man's shoulders. What is most remarkable is that the Pope himself did not describe the voices as purely wonderful. He wrote that their beauty was sharp, almost painful, as though the song revealed truths too immense for him to comprehend. The memory of it persisted even when the music ceased, leaving him restless and troubled. The Vatican has never acknowledged these claims, and no official record has been released, yet the story endures among those who study hidden papal writings. If true, it means that angels may not only appear in visions or stand in silence. Sometimes they may choose to sing, their voices resonating in stone halls where only one man can hear, carrying melodies meant to remind him that the eyes and ears of heaven are never distant. Deep within the Vatican lies an archive so immense and mysterious that it has fascinated scholars and seekers for centuries. Its official name is the Archivum Secretum, which many have incorrectly translated as the Secret Archive. In reality, the word secretum means something closer to private, yet the atmosphere of secrecy persists. Behind its massive doors are endless shelves containing manuscripts, letters, and texts spanning more than 1,000 years. Among these records, whispers claim, are writings about angels that have never been revealed to the outside world. The Church has always spoken of angels in Scripture, in sermons, and in the writings of saints. But within the Archivum Secretum are said to be documents that go beyond, describing encounters and visions that the Vatican has chosen not to disclose. These are not the familiar stories of Michael or Gabriel, but accounts of lesser-known angels, their names and deeds preserved in fading ink. Some of these names were once forbidden by councils, removed from liturgy to prevent misuse, yet they may still rest quietly in the pages of the archive. One 17th-century scholar who briefly gained access to the collection wrote that he had seen a manuscript bound in leather and secured with an iron clasp. Its title, translated into Latin, read "The Watchers." The Watchers are figures from the Book of Enoch, angels said to have walked upon the earth and fallen into transgression. The Church has long avoided public discussion of them, fearing confusion or heresy. Yet if such a volume exists within the Vatican, it means the story was never entirely forgotten, only concealed. Another tale describes a letter from a missionary in Ethiopia stored within the archive that tells of local Christians speaking of an angel who appeared with burning wings above a mountain. The missionary's account was never published, but rumours suggest that it was carefully archived, as though the Vatican wanted to preserve it without allowing the story to spread. What makes the Archivum Secretum so compelling is not only what is inside, but what remains silent. The Vatican explains that the archive is not secret, only restricted, and that scholars may request permission to study certain sections. Yet the reality is that much of it remains closed, with only a handful of people ever allowed to see its most protected volumes. To imagine the shelves lined with records of angelic encounters is to feel both wonder and unease. If even a portion of the whispers are true, then the Vatican may hold a history of angels far greater than what has been told to the faithful. The Archivum Secretum is not just a library, but a vault of mysteries where the hidden wings of angels may still rest in silence, written in ink and sealed behind stone walls, waiting for a world that may never be permitted to read them. Among the papers stored in the Vatican archives, there are rumours of a letter that was written, but never sent. It is said to have been composed by a pope in the early 1800s, a letter addressed to a fellow bishop in which he spoke candidly about angels. Unlike sermons or theological writings intended for the faithful, this was a personal reflection, one in which the Pope admitted to experiences he could not easily understand. The letter describes nights spent in prayer when he felt the presence of invisible watchers in his chamber. He spoke of moments when he believed he heard whispers of encouragement and caution, voices that did not sound like his own thoughts. In one passage he wrote that the air itself seemed to grow luminous, though no candle was burning, and he felt as though wings moved just beyond his sight. He did not call these things visions. Nor did he claim absolute certainty. Instead, he admitted that he was caught between wonder and uncertainty, unsure whether he was being guided or tested. The most extraordinary part of the letter is said to be his confession that he wished to share these experiences with the Church, but feared that doing so would cause turmoil. The faithful might demand answers he couldn't give, or worse, begin to seek direct encounters with angels outside of prayer and worship. For this reason, he chose not to send the letter, sealing it instead in his desk. After his death, it was discovered and quietly transferred to the archives, where it remains unread by the world. Some who have studied catalogues of the archive insist that such a document exists, though its details are carefully concealed. Some say the tale was fabricated, a myth designed to imply that even pontiffs wrestle with enigmas beyond their understanding. Still, the Church's quiet response has only intensified the fascination. Should this correspondence truly rest among the volumes of the secret archives, it would offer an extraordinary window into the personal beliefs of one of Christianity's most elevated shepherds, someone who confessed in writing that he had sensed the presence of celestial beings. The reality that it remained unsent deepens its enigma. Did he intend it for a single confidant? Or was it penned merely to relieve the burden on his soul? Was it concealed because its contents revealed excessive truth? Or perhaps because they disclosed insufficient truth? Nobody knows with certainty, and maybe that explains why this narrative has persisted. What endures is the vision of correspondence, creased and stamped, lying peacefully upon a Vatican shelf. Words about heavenly messengers composed in secrecy, never delivered, never proclaimed from any altar. A quiet witness that even within Christianity's most sacred corridors, divine mysteries sometimes prove too profound to reveal. Within the underground chambers of the Vatican archives, rumours persist of a manuscript unlike any other, allegedly written not with ink but with flame itself. The tale insists this document entered church custody during medieval times, brought to Rome by travelling monks who vowed it had fallen from the heavens during a tempest. The parchment appeared unremarkable at first glance, yet its text glowed softly, as if burned into existence by fire that never charred the surface. The script of this manuscript has never been properly decoded. Some describe it as Hebrew, though unlike any variant recognised by experts. Others insist the writing resembles what scholars term the celestial alphabet, symbols believed to possess strength beyond mortal language. The most peculiar aspect is that these characters become visible only in shadow. Under sunlight, the scroll seems empty, but in nighttime darkness, its words illuminate as though containing inner light. One medieval pontiff allegedly examined this scroll privately, storing it within a small container beside his sleeping quarters. Correspondence from his aide describes discovering the Pope alert during nighttime hours, gazing at the luminous script, mouth moving wordlessly, as if reciting sacred verses. When questioned, the Pope declined to elaborate, but later informed a trusted cardinal that the scroll's text seemed to resonate not through sound, but directly within his spirit. The cardinal documented this moment, noting that the Pope shook as though divine messengers had addressed him personally. The Vatican has never acknowledged this scroll's existence, yet multiple references surface in ancient archive catalogues. One 17th century entry describes parchment of fire restricted to papal viewing. Another mentions writing that vanishes before mortals, yet burns before the Almighty. These records remain brief, as though even documenting such an object carried risk. Why would such a manuscript be hidden? Some theorize the words themselves hold power, a form of prayer capable of summoning or directing angels if voiced aloud. Others suggest the scroll might contain wisdom too dangerous for common use, a prophecy or warning intended solely for Christianity's highest guardian. Whatever its true essence, the Vatican has maintained silence, never permitting its display or examination beyond these walls. The image of a glowing manuscript inscribed by flame and concealed in archives captures the imagination. Whether legend or reality, it represents the mystery surrounding the Vatican's connection with celestial beings. Should this scroll truly exist, then somewhere in the darkness of those secured chambers lies a message that burns with radiance, awaiting the moment it will be examined once more. Among the numerous treasures rumoured to lie concealed within the Vatican archives, one of the most intriguing is believed to be a collection of charts unlike any others worldwide. These are not charts of territory or ocean, but of the heavens, drawn not in stars but in angelic shapes. These unusual diagrams, known quietly as celestial maps, are whispered to have once belonged to the Knights Templar. When their order dissolved in the 14th century, they were secretly transported to Rome and placed among the Church's most protected documents. The charts are described as parchment sheets covered with circles and lines, their patterns resembling star formations, yet marked with names absent from astronomy. Rather than stars, the maps display points of illumination connected by flowing paths, each labelled with titles matching ancient angelic hierarchies. At one centre, a name appears that was long forbidden to speak. Another reveals a design said to resemble a massive wing spanning the page, with Latin annotations speaking of northern guardians. Those claiming to have glimpsed these charts say they weren't designed to navigate the sky as mariners guide vessels. Instead, they appear to outline locations where paradise and earth might connect, moments when the boundary between realms grows fragile. Some propose they served as prayer tools, directing believers toward invoking specific angels in certain regions or times. Others whisper they were far more perilous, offering knowledge of where angels had previously descended, and perhaps where they might be summoned again. The Vatican has never confirmed these maps exist. Yet several 17th century scholars reference celestial diagrams kept under lock. One Jesuit wrote of charts stored with Templar documents, maps displaying not land, but heaven's wings spread across earth. He cautioned that studying them too intensely risked trespassing into mysteries never intended for human command. Should these maps be genuine, they raise disturbing questions. Were the Templars communicating with angels, or did they merely believe they were? Did they perceive patterns in the sky others overlooked, or did they preserve knowledge inherited from more ancient sources? The Vatican's choice to secure them suggests that even if they contain truth, it's truth better concealed. The concept of celestial maps resting silently beneath Rome is both haunting and fascinating. They may be remnants of medieval imagination, or they may represent the closest record of how humans once attempted to trace the movements of heavenly beings. Regardless, they remain among the many secrets whispered about the Vatican, a set of wings sketched on parchment, stored away where only few have ever dared to examine. Stories exist in the archives, speaking not merely of writings or visions, but of designs, blueprints drawn with careful hands. Among these, one of the most remarkable is believed to be a detailed plan for an altar unlike any found in Catholic churches today. It's whispered to be an ancient design dedicated to the angel known as Metatron, a figure seldom mentioned in the church, yet preserved in Jewish mysticism as a heavenly prince, God's own scribe. The mere presence of his name within the Vatican's collection implies knowledge both extensive and deliberately hidden. The blueprint is described as parchment covered in geometric designs, circles within circles and measurements aligned with astronomical points. At its heart lies a raised platform marked with symbols not typically used in Christian worship, shapes that seem to connect faiths older than Rome itself. Notes in Latin written in monastic script identify the drawing as an altar of illumination said to be constructed for an unexplained purpose. Some claim the structure was meant to reflect sound and light in ways that would attract attention from beyond, a kind of portal between human worship and angelic presence. The earliest record of this blueprint dates from the 15th century, when a scholar noted its arrival in Rome from an Eastern monastery. He described it as a dangerous curiosity, too closely linked to forbidden knowledge. His warning was initially dismissed, but the document was eventually sealed in the archive's deepest shelves. Even in his notes margins, he admitted strange fascination with the possibility that such a design could have been inspired not by human hands, but by angelic guidance. The Vatican has never publicly discussed Metatron, for his role belongs more to mystical traditions than to official doctrine. Yet preserving such a blueprint suggests the Church has at least considered the possibility of his influence. Was it studied as a caution or as a tool? No answer has ever been provided. Those who believe this story suggest the altar was never constructed, perhaps because the knowledge to complete it was incomplete, or because the Vatican feared what might occur if it were built. An altar made not only for mortals, but for angels, might transform the nature of worship itself. It might suggest that heaven and earth are meant to meet in ways not openly taught. The image of this blueprint, folded and hidden, lingers as one of the archive's strangest whispers. If true, it means the Vatican may guard plans for a sacred structure intended not for ordinary devotion, but for communion with the highest of angels. A design on parchment, never raised in stone, left instead to rest in the silence of Rome's hidden vaults. Before the name Lucifer became permanently associated with the idea of the fallen one, he was spoken of differently. In the early church, the Latin term itself meant light bringer, and in the writings of the first centuries it sometimes referred to the morning star, the planet Venus, as it appeared in the dawn sky. In Isaiah's ancient verses, the word appears in a passage about a fallen ruler. Yet, through translation and teaching, it became connected with the greatest of angels before his fall. The Vatican holds countless texts that trace this transformation, documents showing how the angel once known for light became the figure of darkness. In certain manuscripts locked away in the archives, scholars believe there are records of how early councils debated this very question. Some bishops argued that Lucifer was never meant to be understood as a proper name, but rather as a poetic image. Others insisted it was the title of the highest angel, a being closest to God who chose rebellion. These debates shaped theology's foundations, but not all their writings were allowed to survive in open circulation. Many were quietly stored, too delicate for ordinary teaching, too dangerous to be read without guidance. Most striking are the descriptions of Lucifer. Before the fall, he is said to have stood among the throne angels, radiant with beauty, his voice like music, and his form filled with brilliance. Ancient hymns, some preserved only in fragments, describe him as the guardian of dawn, the herald of divine glory. These were not words of fear, but of reverence, as though he was once counted among the greatest of the heavenly hosts. The shift from light-bringer to adversary has left a shadow over history, and the Vatican has chosen silence about many details. To speak too much of Lucifer's former role risks confusion, as though one might see him not as the enemy, but as the angel he once was. This silence has fueled speculation, leading some to believe the archives hold entire texts dedicated to his story, perhaps even describing the moment of his rebellion. Why does this matter to Vatican secrets about angels? Because the tale of Lucifer reveals the fragility of divine order when confronted with free will. To admit that the brightest of angels could fall is to admit that even among the most perfect beings there exists choice. This truth, though deeply theological, is unsettling. For this reason, the fuller story may remain buried beneath marble and stone. The Vatican rarely speaks his name, preferring to teach only of his fall and not his light. Yet in the hidden corners of its archives, the memory of the angel before the darkness lingers still, recorded in fading ink, a reminder of what once was before the morning star turned away. Among the most mysterious figures spoken of in ancient writings are the Watchers, a group of angels described in the Book of Enoch. Though this book was once read by early Christians, it was later set aside and declared apocryphal, kept outside of Scripture's canon. Yet traces of its teachings remain, and some believe the Vatican has preserved detailed records about these beings in its archives. The Watchers were said to have been sent to guard humanity, to watch over the earth and guide mankind in its earliest days. But instead of guarding, they fell into temptation and broke their command. The Book of Enoch describes them descending to earth, drawn by the beauty of human women. They took wives for themselves and taught forbidden knowledge, revealing skills and secrets never meant to be shared. They showed men how to shape weapons of war, and women how to use charms and adornments. They taught astrology, enchantments, and the mysteries of the heavens. In doing so, they brought corruption, violence, and pride. The offspring of these unions, according to the story, became giants, a race of beings whose existence disturbed the natural balance of the world. The Vatican's silence on the Watchers has long stirred curiosity. To acknowledge their story openly would raise questions about angels, sin, and the boundaries between heaven and earth. Still, fragments of their tale appear in hidden corners of theology. Some early church fathers referenced them cautiously, while others dismissed the story as myth. Yet the fact that the Book of Enoch was known and respected in ancient times suggests the church did not always turn away from it. There are rumours that manuscripts connected to the Watchers exist deep within the Vatican archives. These may include commentaries from early councils, letters from bishops who debated whether the story should be taught, and even drawings that attempted to capture what these beings looked like. If true, then the Vatican may have preserved far more about the Watchers than it has ever admitted. The story of the Watchers touches on one of the greatest mysteries of angelic history. The possibility that those meant to protect humanity could choose to betray their mission. It raises troubling questions about free will, temptation, and the fragility of creation. It also suggests that the dangers once introduced by these fallen guardians may still echo in the world today, hidden beneath the surface of history. For this reason, perhaps, the Vatican has chosen to remain quiet. The Watchers are rarely mentioned in sermons or prayers, yet their shadow lingers. If their story is indeed preserved in the Vatican's vaults, it remains sealed away, a testimony to angels who were not only witnesses, but participants in the early struggles of mankind. Their legacy is one the Church prefers not to name, but which whispers still in the silence of forbidden texts. Among the names of angels whispered in old texts, one stands out for the silence that surrounds it. That name is Azazel, a figure described in ancient writings as both an angel and a corrupter, a being connected to the sins of mankind. In the Book of Enoch, Azazel is said to have been one of the Watchers. He is remembered as the one who revealed the making of weapons and the craft of war. He showed men how to forge swords and shields, and in doing so, violence spread across the earth. Women, it is said, were taught adornment and charms, knowledge that was seen as leading to vanity and temptation. For these reasons, Azazel was cast into the desert, bound until the day of judgment. Though this story remained alive in Jewish tradition and early Christian writings, the Vatican has spoken little of him in Scripture. The name appears only briefly in the book of Leviticus, where a goat was sent into the wilderness for Azazel on the Day of Atonement, carrying with it the sins of the people. Over time, this ritual gave rise to the term scapegoat, but the figure of Azazel himself faded from public teaching. The Church avoided his name, preferring to leave him buried in mystery. Yet whispers suggest the Vatican has preserved manuscripts that speak of him in greater detail. Some scholars believe that hidden among the archives are writings from early councils in which bishops debated whether to acknowledge Azazel openly or erase him from memory. Others claim that medieval demonologies once listed him among the fallen, but these texts were later locked away. His name appears in some occult traditions, but rarely in official doctrine, as though deliberately erased by choice. Why would the Vatican refuse to speak of him? Perhaps because Azazel's story blurs the line between angel and demon, guardian and corrupter. He was not a vague adversary like Satan, but a named figure accused of giving mankind dangerous knowledge. To admit his influence would be to suggest that humanity's greatest struggles with violence and vanity were not born of men alone, but of an angel who turned against his purpose. Some legends even claim that relics connected to Azazel were once guarded in secrecy. A fragment of iron said to be linked to the weapons he inspired, or prayers once written to ward against his influence. These claims remain unverified, yet they reflect the persistent unease tied to his name. In the end, the Vatican's silence has ensured that Azazel remains a shadow in angelic history. His name is not spoken in liturgy nor remembered in official teaching, yet it lingers in the margins of scripture and apocrypha. If the archives truly hold the fuller story of this forgotten angel, it has been locked away for centuries, a reminder of a presence the Church prefers not to name. Among the most troubling questions surrounding angels is the story of the Nephilim, the mysterious giants described in the 6th chapter of Genesis. These beings are said to have been born from the union of the sons of God and the daughters of men, a passage that has been debated for centuries. Were the sons of God truly angels? And if so, what does it mean for their offspring to walk among mankind? The Vatican has always treated this subject with caution, rarely addressing it directly. Yet scholars believe the archives contain manuscripts that delve into the matter more fully. In the Book of Enoch, which was known in the early Church but later set aside, the Nephilim are described in far greater detail. They are portrayed as the children of the Watchers, towering beings who filled the earth with violence and sin. Their hunger was said to be so great that they consumed everything around them, even turning to the flesh of men when food was scarce. Their existence was so corrupting that God declared the earth must be cleansed, leading to the flood of Noah. This story has long been seen as too unsettling for public teaching, raising more questions than answers. Some fragments of early Christian writings suggest that the Nephilim were known to church fathers, though they disagreed on how to interpret them. Were they literal giants who once walked the earth, or were they symbols of human pride and corruption? In public teaching, the Church leaned toward the symbolic view, but in private study, the matter remained open. The Vatican's refusal to discuss it openly has only fueled speculation that the archives hold manuscripts that address the Nephilim in greater depth, perhaps even preserving accounts of their supposed remnants in ancient times. The silence is telling. If the Nephilim were real, it would mean that the boundary between heaven and earth had once been broken in a way never spoken of. Angels meant to guide mankind would have not only interfered but mingled, leaving behind a legacy that was wiped away, yet never fully forgotten. To admit such a past would unsettle the faithful and raise questions about whether such a breach could ever happen again. Legends from outside the Bible often describe ruins or bones said to be the remains of giants. And while most are dismissed, the persistence of these stories cannot be ignored. Some believe the Vatican has quietly collected such accounts, storing them in silence rather than letting them feed curiosity or fear. The Nephilim remain one of the most haunting mysteries of Scripture. Their shadow stretches across both history and myth, a reminder of the dangers when divine beings cross boundaries never meant to be crossed. The Vatican's silence may be its way of protecting faith, but it also keeps hidden a question that still lingers. What truly walked the earth before the flood? Among the many names whispered in old traditions, Samael is one that carries both reverence and fear. In some texts, he is called the Angel of Death, in others, a prince among the fallen, and in still others, a servant of God who carries out judgment. His role is never simple, never wholly light or wholly dark. Because of this, the Vatican has chosen silence, avoiding his name in sermons and official teaching. Yet there are scholars who believe manuscripts about Samael rest deep in the archives, preserved though never spoken of, a quiet banishment that hides a part of angelic history. In Jewish mystical writings, Samael is portrayed as a powerful being, sometimes called the accuser, sometimes the destroyer. He is said to stand at the edge of heaven, carrying out the will of God with a hand of severity. Yet in other stories, he appears as a tempter leading humanity into sin. This shifting image has caused confusion for centuries. Did Samael serve heaven faithfully, his harsh duties merely reflecting divine justice? Or was he a fallen angel disguised in holy light? The Vatican has chosen silence over answers. This deliberate quiet might stem from the risk of confusion. Speaking of Samael as both divine servant and celestial rebel would muddy the waters between loyalty and defiance. The Church teaches its followers to view angels as bearers of light and demons as agents of darkness. Samael exists somewhere between these absolutes. Acknowledging him publicly would spark theological debates and potentially inspire worship or terror directed toward a being who exists beyond accepted divine hierarchy. Yet evidence suggests the Vatican hasn't completely ignored this mysterious figure. Medieval scholars and theologians wrote about an unnamed angel whose responsibilities included delivering punishment and death. These ancient texts sometimes contained faint marginal notes bearing Samael's name, written hesitantly, as if even inscribing it caused discomfort. Several manuscripts remain in European libraries today, while others reportedly lie concealed in Rome, accessible only to the Church's most trusted scholars. What makes Samael particularly unsettling is his intimate connection to human mortality. Unlike angels who deliver messages or offer protection, Samael appears at death's threshold, standing beside the beds of rulers and commoners without distinction. His presence brings both fear and mercy as he guides souls from their earthly vessels. This paradoxical nature has sparked centuries of quiet theological discussion. By refusing to speak his name openly, the Vatican may have sought to shield believers from both terror and spiritual confusion. The Church's silence itself suggests Samael has never been truly forgotten. He exists in theology's shadows, acknowledged yet unspoken, like darkness dancing at candlelight's edge. If the Vatican archives contain his complete story, it remains sealed away among other angelic truths the Church has chosen to keep hidden. During the 16th century, European missionaries ventured far beyond Rome's influence. Some journeyed into Ethiopia's highlands, where ancient Christian communities had thrived for centuries. Among the correspondence sent back to the Vatican from these distant missions, one letter reportedly described an encounter that startled even experienced clergy. The missionaries' account told of villagers who witnessed a luminous figure appearing on a mountain ridge. A winged presence, bathed in brilliant light that hovered above them before disappearing into the clouds. The priest who documented this testimony didn't dismiss it as mere folklore. He wrote thoughtfully, noting the genuine conviction of those who shared their experience. The locals described the being as enormous and radiant, unlike any human they'd encountered. They said it manifested silently, with wings so vast they cast shadows across entire fields. To them, this was no phantom or weather phenomenon. They were certain they had witnessed an angel. When this letter reached Rome, it was discreetly archived, never shared with the broader Christian world. Perhaps the Vatican worried about encouraging unverifiable stories. Maybe it sought to maintain the delicate balance between official teaching and local beliefs. Nevertheless, the report joined countless other testimonies of the strange and unexplained in the Church's vaults. The silence surrounding such accounts is remarkable. Scripture's angels are accepted without question. Angels in saints' lives are celebrated. But angels witnessed by ordinary people in distant lands often meet with institutional caution. Admitting too much would invite questions the Church wasn't prepared to address. Did angels appear not only to holy figures, but to common people across the globe? Did heaven watch over places far from Rome? communicating through light rather than words. These were mysteries better left unexplored. Still, the Ethiopian angel's story persists. Some believe the Vatican preserved the report because it contained details too vivid to dismiss. The villagers described not just the figure itself, but the surrounding atmosphere, which they said shimmered as if filled with countless fireflies. They spoke of a fragrance like burning incense, though no fires had been lit. These specifics echo descriptions found in much older writings, connecting this remote vision to traditions preserved in ancient scripture. If this letter truly resides in the archives, it stands as proof that angels don't belong to any single people or nation. Their presence, whether rare or common, has been felt across mountains, deserts, and cities worldwide. The Vatican may choose silence, yet the villagers' testimony remains preserved in ink, a story of light that appeared upon a mountain and vanished, leaving only wonder behind. In Burma's verdant hills, now Myanmar, missionaries once documented strange encounters that inspired both reverence and fear. One letter, believed to have reached the Vatican during the 19th century, describes villagers who spoke of a winged presence seen at twilight, standing on a hillside as if protecting the valley below. The figure wasn't described as ethereal vision or dream, but as a solid form, tall and glowing, with wings that shimmered in colours beyond human imagination. The missionary reporting this story noted how the villagers emphasised the profound silence. The being never spoke or moved, but remained motionless for long moments as if observing. Its wings, they said, shifted slightly in the dying light, creating an impression of movement, while the figure itself stayed perfectly still. No one dared approach. Some knelt in reverence, others fled in terror, but everyone remembered what they'd seen. Rome received this account with typical caution. The Vatican has always been careful with reports of angels beyond its own territories. Officially, these stories rarely receive acknowledgement, yet they're often collected, catalogued, and stored in the archives. This particular account, like many others, never became public knowledge, though copies of the missionaries' writings might still exist in private collections. What makes this story unique isn't just the vision itself, but the villagers' response. Unlike many tales dominated by fear, this one included comfort. They told the missionary that since the figure's appearance, their crops hadn't failed and disease had diminished. They believed the angel had come as a guardian, sent to watch over their people. The missionary, while careful not to officially endorse their belief, admitted their sincerity was undeniable. Why would the Vatican keep such a story hidden? Perhaps because it suggested heaven's presence wasn't limited to Europe or to devout Christians. Acknowledging that an angel might appear in distant lands to people outside the Church's direct influence would raise questions about divine care's universality. Such questions, while not heretical, were difficult to integrate into established doctrine. The idea of a winged guardian on a Burmese hill forms part of a larger pattern. Similar accounts from other regions tell of radiant figures appearing far from Rome, often to those who had never heard the gospel or had only recently received it. The Vatican's archives may hold these stories together, a quiet record of angels moving according to their own will, unbound by borders, languages, or religious ceremonies. If true, then the angel of the Burmese hills remains one of many reminders that heaven's mysteries aren't confined to any single location. Silent, watchful, and gone in an instant, such beings leave no physical proof, only memory. Yet in the archive's silence, those memories endure, written on paper, sealed in shadows, waiting for someone to read them once more. One of the most chilling stories whispered to have reached the Vatican came from the sea itself. In the 17th century, a ship departed the Mediterranean, carrying merchants and pilgrims across treacherous waters. Weeks into their voyage, the vessel was caught in a devastating storm. Waves towered above the masts, and the crew prepared for death. During that hour of desperation, according to the ship's official log and later testimony, something extraordinary appeared in the storm clouds above them. Sailors claimed they saw a figure suspended in the tempest, a being with outstretched wings glowing with steady light that didn't flicker like lightning. The men dropped to their knees, believing they witnessed an angel. The figure hovered above their ship, unmoved by the howling winds, and gradually the storm began to subside. One sailor later wrote that it seemed as if the waves themselves retreated in reverence. Within hours, the sea calmed and the vessel survived. When the survivors reached port, their story spread rapidly. Some called it divine intervention, proof that heaven itself had protected them. Others, more sceptical, argued it was merely lightning shaped into recognizable form by terrified imaginations. But the captain, a man not known for superstition, recorded the event with complete seriousness. His testimony was forwarded to Rome by a cleric who interviewed the entire crew. What happened to this record remains uncertain, but scholars studying maritime archives have long noted its conspicuous absence. No copy of the captain's testimony appears in public records. Rumours suggest the Vatican received it, then quietly filed it away, treating it as too mysterious to share publicly but too significant to destroy. Some even claim that sketches of the winged figure drawn by sailors after the storm may still rest in locked Vatican chambers. The lingering question is why the Vatican would maintain silence. Was it to prevent tales of sea angels from becoming sailors' superstitions? Or was it because the account was too vivid, too credible, raising questions about why such interventions occur at sea yet not always on land? The Church has always been cautious about which stories it allows into public discourse, preferring to speak of angels in scripture and tradition rather than scattered, unverified testimonies. Yet the image of that storm remains powerful. A ship on the verge of destruction, saved by sudden calm, and a glowing figure in the sky that no one could forget. Whether it was truly an angel or merely light shaped by fear and faith, the story carries enduring power. The Vatican is said to guard the memory of that night in silence, protecting not only a tale of salvation, but also a mystery too profound to explain. In Brazil's jungles during the 18th century, a young priest maintained a journal that would later cause concern in Rome. He had travelled deep into remote villages, bringing faith to people who had never encountered Europeans. His days were filled with hardship, illness, and isolation, yet he remained devoted to his mission. One evening, while recording his journey struggles, he wrote of an encounter that transformed him forever. The priest described seeing a figure standing at the forest's edge, just beyond his fire's flickering light. Initially, he assumed it was a villager, but looking closer, he saw wings extending from its back, faintly luminous as though catching starlight. The figure stood in complete silence, neither approaching nor retreating. He reported that it raised its hand slightly in what appeared to be a blessing, then vanished into the tree's darkness. The priest was shaken, yet also comforted. He felt his prayers had been answered not with words, but with presence. In his journal, he drew a careful sketch of what he'd witnessed. A tall figure, human in form, with wide wings arched behind. He wrote that the image returned in his dreams, standing repeatedly at the firelight's edge. To him there was no doubt he had seen an angel. When the priest's writings eventually reached Rome, they didn't appear in public collections. Instead, they were quietly removed and stored among other testimonies of angelic visions. The sketch itself reportedly survives in the Vatican archives, though no outsider has confirmed its existence. Scholars who have heard whispers describe it as hauntingly simple, lines drawn by a hand both steady and reverent. The Church's reluctance to acknowledge such visions publicly isn't surprising. Admitting that a missionary had seen an angel in Brazil's depths would invite both devotion and controversy. Some would believe without question, others would demand proof, and both responses could create division. For this reason, such testimonies were preserved privately rather than shared publicly. Yet the story lingers. If the priest's sketch and words remain locked beneath Rome, They're part of a larger tapestry of encounters recorded worldwide. Each serves as a reminder that angels, if they appear, aren't bound to cathedrals or cities, but may choose Earth's most remote corners. The Brazilian priest's vision stands as one of these quiet mysteries, a man alone in the jungle, watched by wings in the night, left with only faith and a drawing to remember it by. Whether it was a comforting vision, a dream shaped by exhaustion, or a genuine angelic encounter, the Vatican holds the answer in silence, hidden within its guarded vaults. In the late 19th century, a mysterious scroll reportedly reached Rome from Tibet. It was carried by travellers who had crossed the Himalayas, men who claimed to have obtained it from monks in a remote monastery. The scroll was unlike anything missionaries or scholars had ever encountered. Written on thick yellowed parchment, the text wasn't in Latin, Greek, or even Tibetan. Instead, it bore strange characters resembling no known script. Some who glimpsed it whispered that it looked like fire transformed into writing, with curling strokes that seemed to move faintly in dim light. According to accounts, the scroll told of a being with flaming wings, a presence that appeared to mountain sages. The description bore similarities to angelic encounters preserved in Christian texts, yet it came from a land far removed from Rome's teachings. The monks who had guarded it claimed the being was neither god nor demon but a messenger, a guardian who travelled between worlds. When asked about the scroll's origins, the monks said it had been with them for generations, its beginnings forgotten, though its power never doubted. When the scroll arrived in Rome, it was quietly placed under study by select priests and linguists. Reports suggest some believed it described an angel, though not in words familiar to the Church. Others considered it dangerous, a blending of traditions that could disturb doctrine. Whatever the case, the scroll didn't remain in circulation. It was locked away in the Vatican's vaults, where it has remained since. Why was it buried so quickly? Perhaps because it suggested that knowledge of angels or similar beings wasn't confined to the Judeo-Christian world. If remote Tibetan monks preserved memories of winged messengers, it raised troubling questions. Were angels known to all peoples across every culture, though described with different names and forms? If so, the Vatican would be forced to acknowledge a wider mystery connecting heaven and earth in ways far beyond its walls. Whispers of the Tibetan scroll still surface among researchers, though no one has seen it outside Vatican custody. Some claim the writing has never been fully translated, that even skilled linguists couldn't grasp its meaning. Others suggest it was deciphered long ago, and what it revealed was too startling to release. Whether myth or truth, the buried scroll's story carries wonder's weight, a relic from the mountains describing a radiant messenger carried across continents only to vanish into Rome's silence. If it remains there still, then somewhere in the Vatican's locked chambers lies a forgotten testimony of an angel, written in a non-Western language, preserved but never spoken of again. In the mid-14th century, when the Black Death swept across Europe, Rome was consumed by terror. The plague claimed families, emptied villages, and left cities in deathly silence. During this time, according to old chronicles, an extraordinary vision reportedly took place above Rome itself. Witnesses claimed to see a figure standing high in the sky, a radiant being with outstretched wings holding a sword of fire. Some interpreted it as warning, others as mercy, but all agreed it was no ordinary sight. The figure was said to appear above Hadrian's mausoleum, a place already steeped in legend. Centuries earlier, during another plague, Pope Gregory the Great had seen an angel above that same structure, sheathing his sword as the sickness began to fade. The 14th century vision seemed to echo that ancient moment, but this time the angel's sword was drawn, its blade burning in the night sky. Those who witnessed it believed the figure had come not to end the plague, but to remind people of their sins. Reports reached the Vatican quickly, and some records suggest the Pope himself was troubled. He ordered prayers throughout the city and processions carrying saints' statues through the streets. Chronicles indicate the vision appeared not once, but several times during the plague's height, always above the same location. Survivors remembered it as both terror and comfort, a sign that even in death, heaven remained near. Yet over centuries, the story faded from official memory. The Church didn't deny angelic intervention's possibility, but neither did it keep this particular vision alive in liturgy or public teaching. It was quietly set aside, perhaps because the image of an angel with a flaming sword was too frightening, too closely associated with punishment rather than protection. The Vatican, according to whispers, kept fuller accounts in its archives, locked away with other angelic testimonies. The Angel of the Black Death, as it became known in later writings, remains one of Rome's most mysterious stories. Some believe it was a vision meant only for that time, a sign of both judgment and hope during history's darkest chapters. Others think it was a memory passed down from Pope Gregory's earlier vision, retold with new fear in a new age. Whatever the truth, the image of wings above the city, glowing with a sword of fire, continues to haunt imagination. If the Vatican still holds detailed records, they remain hidden, preserved as part of angels' long and secret history. A reminder that even in death's shadow, heaven seemed to watch, silent yet present, with wings spread wide over Rome. As the Byzantine Empire approached its end, Constantinople stood both proud and vulnerable. By 1453, Ottoman armies surrounded its walls, and its people prayed for deliverance. Within the final days before the city's fall, there were accounts of visions that troubled both faithful and fearful alike. Chronicles from that time tell of a shining figure seen moving along the walls at night, carrying a sword of light that glowed against the dark sky. Some said it was the Archangel Michael, the city's guardian, come to defend it one last time. The vision gave some courage, but also brought dread, for the angel didn't remain. According to those who recorded it, the light lingered briefly, pacing slowly above the battlements before fading into heaven. When the city fell soon after, many believed this wasn't a sign of victory, but a final farewell, as though heaven had shown itself one last time before the empire's earthly power was broken. The Vatican received reports of this vision in following years. Letters from surviving priests, travellers and merchants who fled Constantinople carried the story westward. Some described the figure as a blazing form of gold, others as a shadow outlined by light, but nearly all agreed it was angelic. Rome treated these accounts carefully, for Constantinople's fall was a deep wound to Christendom. When we consider the departure of an angel, it carries a weight that troubles believers deeply. Some tellings connect this vanishing to ancient prophecy. Stories spread that the Archangel Michael had watched over the great city for centuries, yet would withdraw when destiny called for change. This retreat wasn't abandonment, but the end of an era. Rome itself, they say, examined these accounts, but remained publicly silent. Such understanding would mean that even the greatest cities might lose their heavenly guardians, a concept that would have haunted Europe for generations. The legend of celestial beings over Constantinople persists in hushed voices, kept alive through scattered texts and folk memory. Certain scholars reject it as panic and fantasy, while others point to the remarkable similarity across independent testimonies. The Church's quiet response, like many supernatural accounts, deepens the enigma. Did religious authorities keep more complete records, perhaps even sketches or first-hand statements from clergy claiming direct encounters? If such documents exist, they remain locked away from curious eyes. Constantinople's collapse signalled an empire's death and history's new beginning. Yet within that tragedy lives the memory of celestial wings, of radiance upon ancient walls, a glimpse of divine might that flickered briefly before vanishing, leaving behind both grief and wonder. It reminds us that even as kingdoms crumble, there are glimpses that point toward mysteries greater than any fortress or throne. During the spring of 1915, amid the nightmare of the Great War, fighting men from opposing armies reported extraordinary sights above the killing fields. One of the most persistent stories emerges from a German hillside where soldiers swore they witnessed a luminous figure standing tall against the battle smoke. They portrayed it as a heavenly being with outstretched wings, observing as artillery roared and the ground trembled. For troops buried in trenches, it became a moment of quiet amid madness, a flash of brightness above warfare's terror. Correspondence from the front lines describes this apparition with remarkable precision. Some wrote that these beings seemed to shine, untouched by drifting poison clouds and haze. Others insisted it lifted one arm as if giving benediction or direction. Not every man witnessed it. Those who did spoke with certainty. Maintaining it was no hallucination born from weariness. The stories moved through the ranks, passed from soldier to soldier as hope during humanity's darkest hour. Word of the encounter soon reached Vatican ears. Military chaplains forwarded their observations to Rome, where they were quietly received and documented. But the Church avoided widespread publication of these testimonies. Speaking too freely of battlefield angels invited questions the Vatican preferred to avoid. Why would heaven reveal itself there? To whom was this messenger sent? Was it guarding, alerting, or merely watching humanity's destruction? The German hillside angel became part of a larger pattern. Similar accounts emerged from other wartime locations. Sometimes soldiers described radiant beings moving through smoke. Other times they heard voices like distant hymns that defied explanation, though many dismissed these as mirages created by exhaustion and terror. The consistency of these stories troubled academics. Too many men across too great a distance described identical shining forms. The Vatican's restraint regarding these visions suggests they understood such tales' potential impact. An angelic sighting might inspire faith, but could also create division, especially during a conflict where both sides claimed divine favour. Acknowledging the German hill angel as genuine risked suggesting heavenly judgment or blessing in a war that devastated Europe. Still, these accounts survive in soldiers' letters, confidential reports, and most carefully preserved in the Vatican's own records. The hillside story endures. A winged figure of light standing above the battlefield, neither attacking nor rescuing, simply present. It offered comfort to some, fear to others, and left behind a puzzle the Church has never chosen to clarify. In the 20th century's early years, Pope Pius X reportedly carried a vision that deeply disturbed him. Accounts from his inner circle describe a prophecy he shared only in whispers, never in public addresses, never in written proclamations. It became known as the Vision of the Flaming Host, a mysterious and unsettling image linking the sacred with the terrifying. Private documents suggest the Pope described seeing an altar during Mass, where the consecrated bread, the Eucharist's essence, didn't remain pure and still, but began radiating with scorching light. The radiance intensified until it blazed like fire, burning without being consumed. Within that flame, he reported, appeared a figure angelic in nature, wielding a sword. The being spoke no words, yet its presence filled the Pope with both reverence and dread. He interpreted it as a warning, though he never specified of what. Those who heard him speak privately claimed he believed this vision wasn't intended for him alone, but for the entire Church. He predicted a time when faith would face trial by fire, when even the most sacred elements would appear to burn. Some understood this as foretelling war, others as prophecy of corruption within the Church itself. The Vatican never acknowledged the vision, but their silence spoke as loudly as any confirmation. Whispers persist that pieces of the Pope's personal notes about the vision remain concealed in the archives, written in his own script, but never shared with believers. If genuine, they would reveal a man who saw in the angel's burning presence a sign of purification, agonizing yet essential. He believed the angel's blade wasn't meant for destruction, but to divide truth from lies, faith from uncertainty. For believers who later learned of the burning host, the story carried haunting significance. The Eucharist represents the Church's central mystery, the moment when heaven meets earth. To imagine it consumed in flame with an angel standing watch confronts the possibility that divine gifts can manifest in fearsome forms when the world strays too far from righteousness. The Vatican has never openly discussed the prophecy, and perhaps this was intentional. Admitting a pope witnessed a burning host would disturb the faithful, raising questions about what danger such a vision predicted. Yet memory of it persists in whispers shared among theologians and priests as a hidden aspect of Pius's legacy. The angel of the burning host remains mysterious, half concealed in silence, half glowing in rumour. If the Vatican possesses the complete truth of that vision, they've chosen to keep it sealed, a warning preserved for another era, perhaps for a time when the fire it foretold finally comes. In the mid-20th century, during World War II's final moments, a story emerged that's rarely spoken openly. It concerned Hiroshima's bombing in 1945, an event that shattered the world with anguish and horror. Among the few who survived the catastrophe, whispered reports surfaced of something inexplicable. Survivors claimed that moments before the bomb hit, a brilliant figure materialized above the city, wings spreading wide as though to protect it. The flash followed instantly, and the city was obliterated. Most survivors never mentioned this again, their voices lost in grief and silence. Yet fragments of testimony eventually reached Rome in subsequent years. A Jesuit priest who lived in Hiroshima and who remarkably survived, along with several others near the mission compound, reportedly wrote a private report of what he witnessed. According to him, local survivors described the sky figure as an angel of light standing motionless above the metropolis. Some thought it came as a guardian, others as an observer, still others as a warning of what humanity had unleashed. The Vatican never validated such testimonies, but rumours claim the account was quietly filed in the archives, where it remains secured. The reason for this secrecy isn't hard to understand. Acknowledging an angel in Hiroshima's skies would raise impossible questions. Why would heaven dispatch a messenger if devastation was inevitable? Was the angel helpless, or did it simply bear witness? Such questions would weaken faith rather than strengthen it, so the Church chose silence. Scholars who've heard of this hidden testimony argue that the Hiroshima angel reflects the same mystery as visions from earlier centuries. Angels, when they manifest, don't always intervene to prevent tragedy. Sometimes they bring warnings, sometimes solace. Sometimes they seem merely to watch, leaving humanity to grapple with its decisions. In this way, the Hiroshima vision would echo angels seen during plagues and wars, figures who remind us that heaven remains present even when it doesn't interfere. Some believe the Vatican still guards the priest's original account, along with drawings and statements from survivors who dared speak of what they saw. If true, then one of humanity's darkest hours was also a moment when the barrier between heaven and earth thinned, if only briefly. The Hiroshima angel remains an unspoken mystery, a presence glimpsed within destruction's heart. Whether it was a final warning, a silent guardian, or simply a vision carried by desperate eyes, the Vatican has kept its secret locked in silence while memory lingers like a shadow above the city's ashes. Among the artifacts rumoured hidden in the Vatican's depths, few are as strange as the feather, supposedly encased in gold. The earliest reference appears in a 15th century inventory, a simple entry mentioning a plume of radiant origin secured in a reliquary. No description explains how it was discovered, nor identifies the angel to which it might have belonged. Yet the fact it was preserved with such care suggests its guardians believed it genuine. According to testimony fragments, the feather differs from any earthly bird's. Its length reportedly exceeds a man's arm, with fibres so delicate they seem to shimmer in candlelight. Some claiming to have seen it insist the colour changes with the light, appearing white by day, silver at twilight, and faintly golden at night. Others mention a fragrance that surrounds it, a subtle trace of frankincense, as if the air itself remembers surrounding prayers. The reliquary, crafted of gold and crystal, was reportedly made not only to honour the feather, but to preserve it. Legend holds that when first discovered, the feather began fading, its light dimming, as though it couldn't survive the ordinary world. Encasing it in gold maintained what remained, sealing it away so time wouldn't consume it completely. The reliquary was then placed in Vatican treasury, guarded alongside chalices, vestments, and other sacred artifacts. Why hasn't this feather been discussed openly? Perhaps because its presence poses questions without simple answers. If it's truly from an angel, when and where did it fall? Was it left as a sign? Or was it taken from a being of light in some forgotten encounter? The Church has always been cautious about such mysteries for claiming too much risks leading believers toward wonder rather than worship. By keeping it hidden, the Vatican preserves the relic without stirring devotion to something it cannot fully explain. Some suggest the feather has been examined in modern times, studied with tools unknown to earlier centuries. If so, the results have never been publicised. Perhaps the tests revealed nothing more than an object of rare beauty. Perhaps they revealed something more, something beyond science that confirmed the ancient belief. Either way, the silence continues. The golden reliquary, if it still rests within Vatican vaults, holds more than an object. It holds the suggestion that at some moment in history, heaven touched earth in a way that left behind a trace of its glory. Whether fragment, symbol, or true angel feather, it remains one of the Church's most protected secrets, glowing quietly in Rome's shadows. Among the many unusual items whispered to rest in the Vatican's hidden chambers, there's one relic that disturbs even those who speak of it secretly. It's said to be a robe, charred and blackened, yet never reduced to ash. The story tells of cloth once belonging to a monk who claimed contact with a being of fire. He lived during the late Middle Ages, and his testimony described an encounter that left him blind for days. He said that while praying alone in a chapel, brilliant light surrounded him. At the light's centre stood a figure with wings that seemed ablaze. The monk collapsed to the ground, and when he rose, his robe was burning, but his body remained unharmed. The robe itself, according to those who later examined it, still bears those fire marks. The fabric is darkened and brittle at edges, but has never completely decayed. For centuries it was kept in a monastery, treated as a holy object, until eventually sent to Rome for safekeeping. Once in Vatican care, it vanished from public knowledge. Only in correspondence fragments between clerics does its name appear, always described carefully, as though even mentioning it required reverence. What makes this relic so mysterious is its preservation nature. Unlike ordinary fabric, which weakens and crumbles over time, the robe remains whole despite its age and condition. Some claim that when placed in candlelight, faint embers appear across its surface, glowing and fading like coals that refuse to die. Others say no flame will burn it further, as though it's already been sealed in fire beyond this world. The Vatican's silence regarding the robe perhaps aims to shield believers from confusion. If the burning angel story is true, it would raise questions the Church cannot easily answer. Why would an angel appear in such a frightening form, leaving behind fire rather than comfort? Was it heaven's messenger, or a warning of judgment? And why preserve the robe, unless it was believed to carry proof of what occurred? Some scholars suspect the relic was hidden to prevent veneration that might stray from worship's true focus. Placing a scorched garment before believers could lead to devotion not to God, but to mystery itself. Yet Vatican vaults have always held such objects, preserved not for display but for record, as evidence of events that defy easy explanation. If the burning robe still rests in Rome, it stands as one of history's strangest relics, a garment that should have been destroyed, preserved in darkness, carrying memory of fire that came not from earthly flames, but from wings that blazed with otherworldly light. A secret sealed away, yet heavy with a forgotten encounter's weight. In a quiet section of Vatican treasury, stories tell of a chalice unlike any other, one that glows faintly under candlelight. Unlike ornate cups used in papal ceremonies, this vessel is described as simple in design, made of silver that has aged into a deep, shadowy tone. What distinguishes it is the strange light that seems to rise from within when placed near flame. Witnesses who've spoken of it claim the glow isn't reflection, but a pulse, as though the chalice carries its own life. Legends say the chalice came to Rome in the 13th century through a bishop returning from the East. He claimed it was found in a ruined chapel, abandoned for centuries, where local villagers spoke of strange lights appearing at night. The bishop believed it connected to angelic visitation, though he never detailed what convinced him. When the cup reached Rome, it was examined and quietly placed among other sacred relics. From that moment, it was rarely mentioned again, its existence known only in whispers. Some who've studied the few surviving records argue the chalice may have been used in ceremonies once dedicated to invoking angelic protection. Others think it was kept not for its use, but for what it symbolized, a reminder that heaven can touch even ordinary objects. The light it emits has never been explained. Those describing seeing it say the glow is soft and rhythmic, like breathing's flicker. The Vatican's silence on this relic may stem from caution. Revealing a cup that shines independently would raise questions far too difficult to answer. Was it touched by angels, infused with their presence? Or was it merely an object of strange natural properties, given meaning by faith? Admitting its existence publicly would risk both superstition and skepticism, two forces the Church has always sought to balance carefully. Rumours suggest that on rare occasions Vatican scholars have been permitted to see the chalice, though never to study it freely. Each account is identical. Under ordinary light, the vessel is unremarkable, aged and plain. But in flame's presence, its glow awakens a warmth that fills the room and seems to press gently against the heart. If the glowing chalice remains hidden in Rome, it's more than just a relic. It's a mystery preserved in silver, a quiet sign of something greater than human understanding. Whether born of angelic touch or of some secret long forgotten, the Vatican has chosen to keep it in silence, sealed in shadows where only the watchful keepers of its treasures can see it shimmer. There are tales of a stone kept in Vatican's hidden rooms, a stone that doesn't belong to this world. It's said to have fallen from the sky centuries ago. Yet, unlike any meteorite, it carries strange markings on its surface. The first record appears in a 17th century catalogue of objects delivered to Rome from monasteries scattered across Europe. The description is brief, noting only that it was a heavenly fragment with carvings no one could explain. From that time on, the stone disappears from public record, guarded in silence. Those few who've heard rumours claim the stone is smooth on one side, black and glassy, but carved on the other with lines forming wing shapes. The carvings seem too precise to have been made naturally, yet no human tool of its era could have cut so deeply into such hard surface. Some whispered that the marks glow faintly when touched by firelight, as though the stone remembers the blaze from which it fell. Others insist it carries a hum, a faint vibration felt in hands but never heard. The Vatican has never spoken of it openly, but the very secrecy suggests they consider it more than simple curiosity. If the stone truly bears wing imprints, then it raises a troubling question. Was it simply a natural fragment that inspired belief? Or could it be something more? Something tied to angelic presence? Ancient texts often describe angels as beings of fire and light, descending from heavens in forms both terrible and beautiful. Could this stone have been a trace left behind, a piece of their passage through the world? There are also darker possibilities. Some scholars argue the stone was hidden precisely because of what it implied. If angels leave behind physical traces, then they're not purely spiritual. They cross the boundary between heaven and earth in ways the Church has never wished to define too clearly. Admitting that a relic of their presence exists would blur lines between mystery and matter, between faith and science. In quiet whispers, it's said the stone was last seen in the early 20th century, examined by a handful of priests who left no written reports. Since then, its location is known only to Vatican treasury guardians. Whether it lies in a locked reliquary or has been buried deeper still, no one outside their circle can say. The mysterious stone remains one of the most haunting secrets attributed to the Vatican. A fragment from no known place, carved with wing memories, preserved in silence. If it's real, it may be the closest the world has ever come to holding in its hands an angel's trace, heavy with heaven's weight, yet hidden in darkness. There's a story that the Vatican holds a veil unlike any other, a cloth said to weep without cause. It's not the famous Veronica's veil, nor any relic tied openly to Christ's passion, but something far quieter, preserved in the archive's shadows. According to testimony fragments, the veil is thin and delicate, woven of fabric older than anyone can date with certainty. At first glance it seems ordinary, a simple covering of pale threads, yet those who've tended it tell of moments when moisture drops appear along its edge, as though tears fall from an unseen face. The earliest mention comes from a 17th century report written by a cardinal who described a cloth that grieves. He didn't explain how it was found, only that it had been brought to Rome from a southern Italian monastery. The religious brothers who surrendered it insisted it had been under their protection for countless generations, kept close to a sacred altar where heavenly messengers were once believed to manifest. When the Vatican acquired it, they secured it carefully, documenting its state while remaining silent to the outside world. What renders the shroud enigmatic isn't just the manifestation of tears, but when they occur. Certain testimonies claim the droplets emerge during moments of profound anguish for the Church, as though the fabric perceives sorrow before words are spoken. There are murmurs that in 1914, when conflict erupted throughout Europe, the shroud was observed growing moist once more. In 1978, when Pope John Paul V passed unexpectedly, witnesses alleged the shroud shed tears in the quiet depths of the storage chambers. The Vatican has never validated these tales. Doing so would imply that an artifact, possibly connected to celestial beings, responds to human anguish with its own mourning. This would suggest heaven doesn't merely observe from above, but grieves alongside humanity, a concept both magnificent and disturbing. Rather, the artifact stays concealed, referenced only briefly by those who've worked in the records and retained memories of what they witnessed. Some researchers studying celestial traditions think the shroud might connect to beliefs about angels as keepers of sorrow, entities who transport the prayers and lamentations of believers to God's presence. If the shroud genuinely weeps, it could be tangible evidence of that unseen ministry, a piece of heaven's compassion woven into cloth. Others contend the fabric is too enigmatic, too inexplicable, which explains why the Vatican keeps it locked away, fearing both doubt and misguided worship. If the shroud still rests in the records, it continues as an artifact of grief and faith, a cloth that recalls anguish and responds with silent weeping. Whether it belongs to angels or merely to enigma, it remains a secret held tight, buried beneath centuries of weight. In Rome's centre, below the magnificent Basilica of St. Peter, where countless faithful have walked in devotion, there are rumours of a guardian that watches over the tomb, believed to contain the apostles' remains. For ages, clergy and labourers who descended into the burial chamber spoke of a figure that seemed to manifest in the stillness, not always visible, but frequently sensed. They portrayed it as tension in the atmosphere, a force that wasn't oppressive, but authoritative, as if wings extended wide in a space too confined to hold them. Some declared that subtle radiance gathered in the shadows near the apostles' final resting place, a brightness that flickered and disappeared before vision could focus. One of the first reports traces to the 4th century, when Emperor Constantine commanded the original basilica's construction over Peter's burial site. A labourer allegedly fled in panic after claiming to witness a being with a face like flame standing sentinel in the tomb's shadows. His account wasn't recorded in official documents, but it survived in whispered tales that endured among those serving near the shrine. In subsequent centuries, comparable stories emerged. A visitor in the 12th century documented falling to his knees in the burial chamber, overwhelmed by what he called a protector not of this world. In the 17th century, a stonemason fixing the basilica's foundation mentioned hearing wings moving through air that remained motionless. Each testimony differed, yet all conveyed the same sense. The tomb wasn't abandoned, it was guarded. The Vatican has never discussed this presence openly, though it has vigilantly protected the location. Excavations in the 20th century, conducted under papal authorization, were shrouded in mystery. Those who laboured there later suggested the sensation of a guardian intensified when they approached the bones, thought to be Peter's. Some claimed they couldn't escape the feeling that the space itself fought intrusion, as if someone unseen stood between them and the relics. The concept of an angel protecting the first pope's tomb isn't startling. In Christian theology, angels are frequently portrayed as defenders of holy sites and bearers of divine power. If such a presence truly lingers near Peter's grave, it would signal that heaven continues protecting the Church's very foundation. Yet the Vatican, perhaps fearing to provoke both interest and terror, has kept these accounts in darkness. The angel above St. Peter's tomb remains among Rome's quiet enigmas, a guardian presence never acknowledged yet never erased. Whether vision, fantasy, or genuine celestial protector, the memory of wings in the burial chamber persists, reflecting the belief that the Church's heart isn't only stone and artifacts, but also a sanctuary watched over by light. When a new pontiff is selected, global attention focuses on St. Peter's Basilica balcony, but stories tell of another set of eyes watching from overhead. For centuries, whispers have spread that during each conclave, when cardinals assemble in secrecy to cast ballots, a winged presence has been glimpsed near the chapel or above the basilica itself. The accounts are never formal, never documented in Vatican records, but they originate from guards, assistants, and even some cardinals who later suggested what they thought they observed. One of the first such testimonies comes from the 1271 conclave, when a clerk reported witnessing a form like fire crossing the chapel roof as votes were tallied. He provided no further details, but the note passed among attendants as a reminder that selecting a pope wasn't purely human. Later in the 15th century, a Swiss guard insisted he saw wings stretch across the nighttime sky above the Sistine Chapel, though no sound accompanied it, he whispered to fellow guards. But the matter was never publicly discussed again. In recent times, the story has continued. During the 1958 conclave, a Vatican servant allegedly fainted after insisting an angel stood by the chapel entrance as ballots were brought inside. The incident was quickly dismissed, but those near him noted he never altered his story. In 2005, rumours quietly circulated that a faint glow appeared above the Sistine Chapel on the night of white smoke. The Vatican provided no statement. As usual, the notion of an angel overseeing the conclave aligns with ancient customs. In Scripture, angels frequently serve as witnesses to sacred agreements and guard entrances to holy places. Having such a presence observe papal elections would symbolize that the selection isn't only guided by humans but also by heaven. Yet admitting this publicly would raise questions too mysterious for the Church to address. Are the angels choosing? Are they simply watching? And what if different witnesses describe the presence in contradictory ways? The Vatican's silence has maintained the mystery. Only in personal correspondence, scattered testimonies and careful whispers does the tradition survive. Perhaps those who see the figure receive a glimpse meant only for them, a reminder of the significance of what unfolds. Or perhaps the winged guardian truly stands watch, ensuring that even in a secretive human process, the divine remains present. The conclave's angel remains an unspoken legend, witnessed by few, denied by none. Hidden behind red curtains and solemn oaths, whether light above a roof or silent footsteps by a door, it endures as another secret about angels the Vatican has never chosen to reveal. There's a quiet tale told within Vatican walls about a pontiff who, at life's end, claimed to see a vision few have openly discussed. In his final days, frail and surrounded by prayer, he allegedly described a presence that filled his chamber with radiance. Those beside him, attendants and confessors alike, recorded that he spoke peacefully, without terror, of a figure standing at his bed's foot. He named it an angel, and though his voice shook, his words remained firm. He described the being as neither masculine nor feminine, brilliant yet tender, its wings arching high as if touching the ceiling itself. What impressed him most wasn't the sight, but the sound, for he said he heard melody, soft and distant, as though it originated far beyond Rome's walls. The angel remained silent, yet he felt in his heart it had come to escort him home. Those present later noted the room itself seemed to brighten, though no additional lamps or candles had been kindled. The Vatican has kept such visions private, viewing them as personal encounters rather than public revelations. Yet this particular account has remained, preserved in quiet testimonies. Some say the Pope, in those final moments, extended his hand as if welcoming the visitor, whispering a prayer none could completely hear. Within hours, he departed, leaving behind a sense of tranquility that settled over all who were there. Throughout history, similar accounts exist of holy individuals visited by angels at death's approach. In Scripture, angels are often portrayed as messengers who escort souls into eternity. If such a vision truly appeared to a pope, it wouldn't contradict that tradition. Yet the Vatican's silence reveals its cautious approach. Sharing the story openly might invite examination or risk transforming a private grace into spectacle. What makes this vision particularly moving is its timing. The Pope who experienced it had borne heavy responsibilities during his life, shepherding the Church through conflict and uncertainty. That his final hours would be marked by a vision of light suggests a reward, a sign of comfort from beyond. Whether it was a death angel, a guardian, or a being sent simply to reassure him, the presence left behind a memory too powerful to ignore. The dying Pope's final vision remains locked in quiet remembrance, never preached from pulpits, never written in official letters. Yet among those who know the story, it endures as one of the Vatican's most gentle secrets. That in his last breath, a church shepherd wasn't alone but welcomed by wings of light, a mystery not proclaimed but treasured in silence. There are secrets the Vatican guards not only to protect its treasures but to safeguard the faith of millions. Among the most whispered is the idea that certain truths about angels are known but never disclosed. Some stories are too disturbing, others too wondrous, and still others so mysterious that no explanation can satisfy. In these instances, silence becomes protection, a way to preserve belief without opening doors to confusion or fear. For centuries, cardinals and scholars have documented encounters and relics tied to angels that were carefully hidden from the public. These aren't denials of heaven's presence, but acts of prudence. If every strange vision or relic were displayed, it might lead people to worship objects instead of God, or to seek signs instead of faith. The Vatican's choice to guard such secrets is often presented as protective action, meant to keep devotion pure. Yet beneath that reasoning lies the haunting possibility that some truths are too powerful to speak aloud. There are records of testimonies that were set aside, locked away, because they described angels in ways that didn't match official teaching. Some described figures of flame and shadow, others beings whose wings darkened the sky. These images, though awe-inspiring, might lead the faithful to question if all angels were benevolent, or if some were meant to test rather than comfort. Such questions, the Vatican believes, are best left to mystery, for answers could disturb the hearts of those seeking only peace. There are also relics, allegedly hidden for the same reason. A feather encased in gold, a garment that burned but was never consumed, a cup that glows in darkness. All preserved but never declared. If these were brought into light, they would attract endless curiosity. Pilgrims would journey not to pray but to witness. Faith would shift from the eternal to the tangible, and devotion might be consumed by wonder. Better, then, to keep them hidden so their mystery continues serving, quietly strengthening belief through silence rather than spectacle. The greatest secret of all may be that the Vatican doesn't conceal angels to deny their presence, but to protect the faithful from knowledge's weight too vast to bear. For if heaven truly walks among us, leaving behind feathers, fire and light, then every life and every choice carries gravity beyond imagination. Not all are prepared to bear such truth. In this way, the Vatican's secrecy becomes its own guardianship. It protects not only relics and archives, but believers' hearts, shielding them from mysteries too deep for conscious minds. Whether one views this as wisdom or concealment, the silence itself speaks. It tells us that some encounters with angels aren't meant for the world, but for heaven's hidden keeping. In the 12th century, letters from missionaries in distant territories often contained more than simple conversion reports. Some described visions and encounters so strange they were quietly sent to Rome, where they were copied, stored, and then hidden away. One such collection came from Ethiopia, a land rich in ancient Christian tradition. The missionaries wrote not only of faith they discovered there, but of something they couldn't explain. They told of light figures appearing above mountain churches, seen by both villagers and priests. These figures, tall and radiant, allegedly had wings that stretched wide, shining like bronze. In the local language, the native Christians spoke of them as guardians, protectors who stood watch over their sanctuaries. The missionaries, uncertain how to interpret what they witnessed, described them carefully, choosing words so as not to appear foolish. Yet their letters carried tones of awe and fear, for they admitted the visions seemed too clear to dismiss as dreams or illusions. One missionary wrote that he felt the air grow thick as the figure appeared, and though he tried praying aloud, his voice failed, as if silenced by the presence itself. When these letters reached Rome, they were read with caution. The Vatican valued missionary testimony, but such reports carried risks. If made public, they could stir curiosity that overshadowed church teaching. Were these visions truly angelic, or could they have been misunderstood natural phenomena? To answer such questions openly would invite division. Instead, the letters were stored quietly, added to the growing collection of mysteries the Church chose to keep in silence. The Ethiopian accounts are especially striking because of the region's own traditions. Long before Western missionaries arrived, Ethiopian Christians had preserved stories of angelic guardians, often tied to their ancient churches carved into stone. To them, the visions confirmed what their faith had long held true. But to the Vatican, the blending of local belief and missionary testimony was difficult to explain. Was it a meeting of cultures? Or was it proof that angels moved freely across lands and peoples, appearing in ways that transcended borders? For centuries, the letters remained hidden, mentioned only briefly by a few scholars who discovered them in the archives. Their silence reflects the Church's careful balance between mystery and doctrine. To acknowledge angels in Ethiopia would mean admitting heaven's presence isn't confined to Rome, but spread across the world in ways the Church doesn't control. Whether vision or truth, the Ethiopian letters suggest angels may have stood watch in places far from Europe. their wings spread above mountain churches while the faithful prayed below. Preserved in the Vatican's vaults, they remain a reminder that heaven may touch earth anywhere and that light's guardians aren't bound by walls or borders, but move freely across the world. Among the Vatican archives, scattered accounts exist from missionaries who travelled east, carrying the gospel into lands filled with their own deep mysteries. One of the most intriguing stories comes from Burma, where in the 17th century a group of missionaries wrote of an encounter in hills far beyond the towns. They reported that villagers spoke of a presence that came at twilight, a winged figure that appeared on ridges when the sky turned red. Some described it as tall and shining, its wings spreading like the horizon itself. Others said it appeared more as shadow, silent but overwhelming, a watcher in the twilight. The missionaries, though cautious, admitted they themselves had glimpsed something strange. One described standing at a clearing's edge as the sun dipped low, when the air grew still and an immense form seemed to rise from the ridgeline. He wrote that though he tried looking directly, his eyes blurred, as if he were forbidden from seeing too clearly. What struck him most was the silence, for even birds stopped singing, and villagers bowed their heads as though they knew the visitor well. When these letters reached Rome, they were studied but never shared. The Vatican treated them as private testimony, too uncertain to be declared and too extraordinary to be ignored. Were these truly angels appearing in distant lands, or visions born of local belief that missionaries had taken too literally? The Church couldn't say. Instead, the documents were filed away, placed among many mysteries too difficult to explain without raising questions. The story of the Burmese angel raises an important truth about the Vatican's silence. Angels aren't tied to one place or people, yet acknowledging their appearances in faraway lands might unsettle the idea of Rome as Christian order's heart. The missionaries themselves believed they had seen a guardian watching over the hill people, a being that cared not for borders or language, only for the prayers of simple villagers who raised voices to heaven. Centuries later, the letters still rest in the archives, fragile and fading, but carrying the weight of a vision too powerful to dismiss. To the Burmese villagers, the presence wasn't strange at all. It was part of their life, a mystery accepted without fear. But to the Vatican, it was a puzzle best kept in silence, a secret that could never be fully explained without opening more questions than answers. The winged presence in the Burmese hills remains one of the Vatican's quiet mysteries, a reminder that angels, if they walk the earth, aren't confined to cathedrals or great cities. They may choose the high places, the remote villages, the world's edges, where prayers rise in silence and are met by wings in the fading light. There's a curious record preserved in the Vatican's shadows, a story that came from the sea rather than from land. In the 18th century, a Jesuit priest wrote of a ship that never returned from its voyage, though surviving sailors told of a vision unlike anything they'd seen before. According to the account, the vessel had been caught in a violent storm somewhere in the Atlantic, waves rising higher than masts, wind tearing at sails. The men prayed desperately, expecting death at any moment, when a sudden calm opened in the sky above them. Through the break in clouds, they swore they saw a figure standing above the waters, immense and radiant, wings spread wide against the storm. Some said the being held a sword of light. Others that it carried nothing at all, but shone like a star. The sailors claimed the wind stilled, waves fell, and the ship passed through chaos untouched. Yet when they reached land, they found no one who believed their tale. Even the priest who recorded their words admitted his doubt, but he wrote carefully, as if he feared leaving the story untold. The ship itself vanished months later on another journey, lost without explanation. This only deepened the mystery, for the surviving accounts were preserved in Rome, where the priest had sent them as testimony. The Vatican never spoke of them publicly, though copies were kept among other reports of strange encounters with beings thought to be angels. To reveal such a story would raise too many questions. Why would an angel appear above the sea? Was it sent to save those men for a purpose? Or was it only a fleeting glimpse of greater power? In the centuries since, the tale has become one of many hidden stories that linger in the archives. Scholars who've heard whispers of it suggest the vision recalls ancient belief in angels as travellers' guardians, protectors who appear when danger is greatest. Sailors have long prayed to St. Michael and other celestial defenders, and perhaps this vision was an answer to their desperate pleas. Yet the Vatican has never declared it as such, leaving the matter shrouded in silence. For those who believe, the story offers a reminder that the sea itself isn't beyond heaven's reach. Angels, if they walk the earth, may also watch over waters, guiding ships through storms unseen. For others, it's a tale too strange, too uncertain, and better left buried in history's vaults. The angel above the lost ship remains one of the Vatican's unspoken mysteries, a vision preserved only in fading letters and cautious whispers. Whether a true encounter or desperate hope turned into memory, it's a story that carries the sea's weight and the silence of wings over the waves. Among the most unusual documents said to rest within the Vatican archives is a scroll that came from far across the world. Carried by travellers from Tibet in the 19th century, the scroll was given to a Catholic priest who had journeyed through the mountains. Though much of its writing was in unfamiliar script, the images upon it were striking. They showed beings with wings of fire and halos like suns, standing between heaven and earth. The priest believed the figures were angels, though villagers who carried the scroll spoke of them in words tied to their own ancient faith. When the scroll arrived in Rome, it was studied in silence. Scholars compared the drawings to descriptions found in scripture and prophets' visions, noting strange similarities. The wings were vast and layered, the eyes unblinking, the light surrounding the figures both comforting and fearful. The suggestion was troubling. Could people in distant lands without Christian contact have preserved their own visions of the same beings? If so, it meant angelic presence wasn't bound to one culture, but known across the world in ways the Church couldn't easily explain. Because of this, the Vatican chose not to display the scroll. Some believed it revealed too much, hinting at universal memory of angelic beings that couldn't be confined to doctrine. Others feared it would confuse the faithful, who might wonder why heavenly figures appeared in art of those who'd never heard the gospel. The scroll was placed into archives, where it became one more secret among many whispered about but never declared. There are hints that the scroll's images carried more than artistry. A few who examined it claimed the pigments shimmered faintly in light, as though made with materials unknown in Europe. Some even said a faint warmth could be felt when the scroll was unrolled. Though no explanation was offered, such details only deepened the mystery, feeding belief that the scroll wasn't merely symbolic, but born of direct visions recorded by those who'd truly seen. In time, the scroll was buried deeper in vaults, and its story nearly forgotten. Yet those who know of it speak of the power it holds, a bridge between worlds showing that angels appear not only in Rome's churches, but also in Tibet's mountains, where prayers rose to heaven in another tongue. The scroll delivered from Tibet remains one of the most haunting relics in the Vatican's hidden collection, a testimony that angels have walked across cultures and ages, preserved in silence. It reminds us that some mysteries are too vast for borders, and that heaven's messengers may leave their marks in places the world never expects. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of this journey through the Vatican's hidden stories about angels. If one of these mysteries stirred your imagination or made you wonder what else might be kept in silence, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this bedtime story filled with history, secrets and mystery, Make sure to subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss the next tale. Stay curious, rest well, and until we meet again in the shadows of history,